Jolly good. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome. This is the first Cabinet meeting of 2024, 16th of January. Going to start with apologies for absence. I'm aware of apologies been submitted for some time for this evening from Councillor Malcolm Longley, but also last-minute apologies for Councillor Phil Larratt. I think other than that, we're a full team. We have the rest of the team. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Does any Cabinet member wish to declare anything as a declaration of interest in this evening's agenda? No, thank you. Minutes. We have minutes of our last meeting. That was dated the 12th of December. Can I just ask if everybody's had a chance to look at the minutes? Are there any suggestions for amendments, corrections? Adam.
Apologies, Chairman. I need to declare an interest in item 12. My son would be subject to the admissions arrangements for that scholastic year.
Fantastic. Yes, of course. Thank you very much. Moving back to the minutes.
Chair, sorry.
Yeah.
Item 14, just declaring an interest on that as well. I'm a Northampton Town Councillor, and I believe someone from the Town Council is speaking this evening. But it's worth me emphasising that any Town Council meeting that I've been a part of where office has cropped up as a conversation, I've opted to leave the room and not take part in any discussion, enabling me to be a part of discussions here tonight.
Oh, I see. Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful. Matt?
Yeah, thank you. I'll declare the same interest as Adam.
Very good. Okay. If that's all the declarations of interest, back to the minutes. Everybody will have had a chance to look at them. Any Cabinet member, any suggestion for amendments, corrections? No, can I ask you to confirm that they're agreed? Is that agreed? Thank you. We'll sign the minutes. I have no specific chair's announcements this evening. Other than to welcome anybody, note that we do have quite a few people registered as not West Northants councillors, such as Councillor Birch, Councillor Soane from the Town Council and Councillor Johns from Toaster Town Council, but we have all the speakers against each item and we'll call you to speak as each item comes along. Welcome. Other than that, urgent business, I've not been notified of any urgent business at all this evening. We also, for item 6, have no report from overview and scrutiny committees. So we'll move on to item 7. This is Northamptonshire Safeguarding Children Partnership Annual Report 22-23. Fiona will introduce the report, after which we have 2/3 speakers. That's to say, firstly, Councillor Beardsworth, secondly, Councillor Purser, and given Councillor Randall's absence, Councillor Purser is also reading a statement. And can I actually at that point extend sympathies to Councillor Randall, who's had the death of a very close family member, and we send her all our best wishes. So Fiona, over to you to introduce this one.
The Northamptonshire Safeguarding Children's Partnership Annual Report 22-23, which outlines the partnership achievements during the recording period. As I'm sure you all know, our Safeguarding Children Partnership is made up of strategic leads across the partnership and covers the whole of Northamptonshire. The partnership is required to produce an annual report that provides an overview of its achievements against the Safeguarding Partnership business plan. This report provides assurance to members of the activities undertaken and the partners and their agencies to safeguard children and young people across the whole of Northamptonshire County. The annual report includes quantitative and qualitative data, key messages, and impact of activities that relate to the 3 priorities set out in the NSCP business plan. One being taking positive action early enough to protect children. 2, to support children, young people and families at risk of exploitation. And thirdly, to work effectively as a partnership and support our staff. The report also sets out plans for 2023-24, as set out on page 24 of the annual report, which include continue to strengthen our responses to the health and well-being of our children and young people, launch of the child exploitation video, child exploitation risk assessment framework, toolkit and child exploitation hub, support development of the serious violence duty unit, continue to strengthen and increase our local bespoke virtual and face-to-face training offer, strengthen hearing the voices of children and young people, consistency and promotion of good practice, review of multi-agency safeguarding hub, embed GCP2 neglect toolkit and launch public neglect campaign, strengthen mapping missing children, strengthen education representation and create a safeguarding in education group. These are all things planned for this coming year. It is recommended, you will see from the papers, that the board is funded by both North and West councils, North and West Dedicated Schools Grant, our police partners and health authority partners. It's recommended that Cabinet receives the Northamptonshire Safeguarding Children's Partner Annual Report 2022-23 and note the findings. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Fiona. Let's go to our speakers then. First of all, Councillor Beardsworth. Sally, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair. I've read this report from cover to cover, and I've just realised really the extent of the work that the safeguarding team have to deal with. The worry I've got primarily is the preventative side of things. We seem to always be picking up the problems as things are going on, rather than stopping them happening before they do. You've got several case on page 35. You've got several case notes. A child aged 2 has been in hospital since birth because of the challenging to discharge and the complexity of the care package and the family situation. But it can't be right to have a child in hospital for 2 years. I mean, it's not a normal existence for a child to be in that environment for that length of time. I don't know the case, and I don't know the prognosis or the understanding of the situation, but it just seems to me that it just seems an awful long time to have a child in a hospital bed, in the hospital situation. And a lot of other things that we hear that people come into care because of neglect. 60% of our children come into care because of neglect. Now, neglect doesn't have to stand hand in hand with poverty. It's just a question of nurturing and looking after a child. And I think basically, why is this still happening in this day and age? We should be having things in place to prevent children coming into care. Education, it needs people to be talked through when they become pregnant to find out if they're capable and can learn how to be a good parent. I just worry sometimes that we're not doing enough to prevent people falling into this trap. And then we have children come into care that are damaged, have difficulty with their lives from then on. So I really feel as though they do a lot of work and it's very extensive. I just wish there was more in here about prevention, and I hope that can be taken back. It's a good report. It covers a lot of different aspects, but I still feel a lot of these things, you know, you've got a lot of multi-agency panels. You've got people that talk about it all the time, but what actually is being done to get these children to stop them coming into care and to stop children with knife crime, various other things like that, and care leavers as well. I could bring you lots of references, but I'm sure you've all read the papers yourself and share with me some of my concerns. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Councillor Purser. Bob, who, yes, did anybody want to ask any questions of Sally? No? No, I think we're okay. Thank you, Sally. Welcome, Bob, who may have his own words, but also some points from Councillor Randall. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I echo many of Sally's comments there. Lots to welcome in this report. And there's actually, we could have a long discussion on it. many of the points were covered in the Children's Trust briefing before Christmas, and that this issue of how do we really get into the prevention work, and we've got to work on that, and we've got need some really creative thinking about moving in that direction. Other places I've seen data broken down between North and West, and there's some useful comments in that direction. And it's encouraging that children are receiving better support now than they were in 2019. So that is good. But there still are quite a lot of serious incidents being reported. You have to read quite carefully to see them, but there are still a number of children each year in very serious situations. And it's important that we learn the lessons for those and develop best practice. Again, picking up the issue of neglect, and I think this is very much related to the cost of living crisis that we've got at the moment. And I think cost of living crisis leads families struggling to a neglect situation. This is something that Wendy's really very concerned about how do we pick up those families early enough so that they're supported and don't end up in a crisis situation. Are we doing enough there? The section on bringing education in as a partner, which I think I understand has happened over the last, that's really welcome. They really should be a partner, and that's good. And just noting their areas of concern, vaping they pick up, which we've raised in council, and there are a number of issues. The Safeguarding Education Group is a very welcome development. Very concerned about 902 children being home educated. I think this is a development that really is a trend that we've got to row back on. We've got to find out why those children are not coming to our schools. I think we're setting ourselves up problems for the future, really. So I think this trend for home education is worrying. There was a section on domestic abuse, which I think bears looking at in more detail. Why are we below our forecast level of incidents, but having a higher prosecution rate? There's something going on there. So we just need to make sure that we're doing the best we can there. And then there's the issue of children who are missing from education, that which we've talked about before. Wendy's very concerned about that we really just kind of look at that. I think the whole move towards education trust doesn't help us deal with that, but we've got to, I think we as a West Northants have a duty to think about all our children. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's the last of our speakers. So we'll hand back to Fiona, perhaps just to make any further comments or pick up some of those questions raised.
Yes, thank you. I think that probably Rebecca, who's our DCS, and I both share a lot of those concerns. This is the safeguarding partnership that tends to be an overseeing and overlooking of things that have happened and investigate into things that might happen. We do have many other boards in different parts of our portfolio that actually do deal with a lot of those other issues. We've got a domestic abuse panel that is looking at that. We've got that's people looking into missing education and the reasons why young people are missing and what categories they fall into, as to whether it's through social, emotional, mental health, whatever, so that we can have a better understanding of why children are not in school and what difficulties they're having in order to achieve that. And also home education. Home education, I'm going to admit now, I've fallen foul of this in the past by saying I'm against home education, and there are quite a large cohort of people who very successfully educate their children at home in exactly the way that we would wish them to be educated, that attend friendship groups, they go to gymnastics, they go to all those other things to mix with other children, but they are very well educated at home. And it may be due to bullying issues when going to secondary school, which the ones I've spoken to, that has actually been the case. So there are some that are well educated home education. There are some of our special educational needs children who are home educated for various reasons. And we hope to, if we start that at young age, we hope to integrate them into mainstream schooling at a slightly later age. But I agree, it is an excuse in some people's case to say they're going to home educate, because that means they can remove the issue of getting their child to school every day. And we are now checking up on all of these people who are on the home education list. When I first started in this portfolio, we had nobody doing that work. So now they are checked up on. We do have a register of who they are, and we do know who they are and where they are. So we are doing what we can, but as you say, as both speakers have said, we would like them all to be in education, so we knew that they were safe. And it's not the aim of all of us in this council to keep children safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Any points or questions from members of the cabinet? No? Okay, in which case the recommendations are towards the start of the report. I'll just ask you to confirm your agreement to those recommendations. Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, this takes us on to item 8. We have a number of speakers for this. We'll get Matt to introduce this very shortly. Speakers then in this order are Councillor Martin Johns from Towcester Town Council, Councillor Lisa Sambiotis, Councillor Sally Bidsworth, Councillor Jonathan Harris, Councillor Emma Roberts, and then finally Councillor Bob Purser. We'll bring them in after Matt has taken us through the introduction. Matt, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. So the Care Act 2014 places a statutory duty on us as a local authority to provide care and support to people that have assessed and eligible social care needs, alongside responsibilities to ensure sufficient supply of residential and nursing care services through effective market development activities. Cabinet will be aware that back on the 23rd of October 2023, we as a council commenced with a public consultation exercise on the options for the future of the council-owned residential care home at Ridgeway House, Towcester. The council does not take the closure of a care home lightly, and we appreciate this recommendation will have an impact on the existing 15 residents, families and staff. However, the consequences of the council not taking forward proactive action is likely to have greater impacts. West Northamptonshire Council needs to be able to ensure it is in a position to offer high quality care, which continues to meet the changing needs of its residents, both now and in the future. And today, as I just mentioned, there are 15 residents at Ridgeway. So the top floor of the building cannot be used because of health and safety risks. In addition to this, the environment does not support the safe care of high needs residents. The service has the lowest occupancy across West Northamptonshire run care homes and has an overall inspection rating of requires improvement, with the last inspection published back on the 1st of November 2022. Infection control audits carried out by the Care Quality Commission, the CQC, have highlighted challenges with the environment and insufficient facilities to offer personal care to customers. None of the rooms have ensuite facilities and require up to 8 people to share a toilet and bathroom, reducing the ability of staff in the home to support people's dignity and respect. There are long-standing and considerable difficulties in the recruitment and retention of staff at Ridgeway House, and the recent pay increases put in place by council for frontline workers and ongoing recruitment initiatives have meant that workers' numbers have remained stable. However, this activity has not provided the increase in numbers that are required to deliver a full staffing establishment, meaning the home is unable to utilise its full bed capacity. There remains a considerable high dependency on agency staff to support the safe staffing levels in the home. The building is over 40 years old, and whilst it would have been compliant at the time of build, it would certainly not meet today's CQC accessibility or facility requirements for new build care homes due to the lack of ensuite facilities and the reduced accessibility for wheelchairs and hoists. It should also be noted that ensuite rooms have been a requirement by the CQC since 2003. Added to this, there is insufficient space for the environment to be improved or increased in size. The home requires an increase in intervention just to maintain it as a safe environment. A condition survey in 2020 highlighted that to maintain the home at just a basic habitable standard would require a minimum investment of approximately £1 million over the next 10 years. The number of people who need registered care home provision in what is now West Northamptonshire is reducing in line with national policy as we support more people successfully to remain in their homes. However, the needs of people in registered care homes are now more complex, with an increasing number of people requiring nursing care rather than the residential care. Whilst the workforce is skilled and able to meet these more complex needs, the environment and buildings limit the ability to meet these high needs or vary the CQC registration. Ridgeway House has 44 rooms. However, it is significantly under-occupied as the design of the building means that the facilities available within the home are unable to meet the needs of an increasing number of people who require residential care. Referrals to the home have been prioritised. However, the home is not able to meet the needs of these people due to the issues described. The council, from the consultation, wanted to seek views on its proposals for the future use of Ridgeway House and wanted to hear about the experiences of people who reside in the home and their families, along with the staff and other interested stakeholders. The consultation asked questions around two approaches: approach 1, no change, and approach 2, a safe closure programme. A total of 187 people responded to consultation via a full completion of the questionnaire, and 181 of which were completed online. The full consultation report is appended to today's Cabinet report with a full breakdown and analysis, including a copy of the original consultation document contained. There was an option to request a one-to-one meeting with senior staff during the consultation, and this was not requested. I also highlight that I nor the director have had any requests from contact from residents or their families during this process. All responses from people who have experienced life at Ridgeway House commented on how satisfied they were as a result of the quality of the care they receive, and I thank the staff for their hard work and support to the residents. Of those who disagreed or strongly disagreed with a safe closure approach option, participants cited the unsettling impact on residents and residents needing to remain in the area and close to relatives as being the main reasons for doing so. 5 out of the 15 remaining residents are from the Northampton area, and we will work with their families to place those residents appropriately within the Northampton area. We've also conducted a study into the availability of places within 5 miles of Towcester and have noted there are 13 care homes within 5 miles and that they have 549 beds, of which 56 are currently vacant. Again, we will work with residents and families to place residents in the most appropriate place possible. 5.7 in the report talks about the fair cost of care, and the council's fair cost of care rates applicable to Ridgeway House is £861 per week for the 2023-24 budget year. As a result of the issues detailed within the paper and the resulting impact on occupancy, Ridgeway House is currently operating at a rate of £1,474 per week, significantly in excess of the council's established rate. This presents a significant challenge for the council, where it is cost of delivering care is significantly higher, than the cost that is commissioning care from the independent sector. I would like to add that the leader and I, the Director of Adult Social Care, the Assistant Director of Assets and Environment, and other key staff members visited Ridgeway recently to ascertain and see for ourselves the potential for making significant physical changes to the property in order to make it compliant with current CQC regulations. We concluded to do any significant work aside from the cost, the priority would be obviously the safety of residents who would have to be moved while any works would be carried out. From our experience of the recent Boniface House closure, I have confidence in the closure process and the way in which we have carefully worked with residents and their families. There have been no issues raised by former residents of their families regarding the closure of Boniface House, and this report references the Managing Care Home Closures Good Practice Guide and Management Checklist approved by the CQC. My personal reaction on viewing Ridgeway is that it is way out of date and unsuitable to meet the modern needs of residents who will be placed there. I therefore have no reservation whatsoever in recommending to Cabinet we proceed with the commencement of the safe closure programme, of course ensuring we put the needs of residents and their families at the centre of the process, and the commencement of formal consultation with effective staff members as per the recommendations on the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I know there's still some questions amongst the cabinet, but we'll take our speakers first. And first speaker is Councillor Martin Johns from Toaster. Welcome.
Chairman, councillors, I'm here to voice my concern and the concern of Toaster Town Council that you're being recommended by officers to close Ridgeway House in Toaster. The Town Council, and I believe a majority of local residents, and indeed those who use Toaster as a local centre, are urging West Northants Council to delay the proposed closure and go back to your previous plan for a new care home in the town. In other words, respect the findings of your own consultation that you commissioned, as detailed in Appendix A. Toaster's local MP supports pausing closure and has gained considerable support with a petition. Whilst I recognise there is some irony in this, given that over the past 14 years of her government, public services have been hollowed out and social care neglected. Therefore, I have some sympathy with the council as it struggles with meeting increasing needs with an ever-decreasing budget. Some sympathy, but not a great deal, having heard the presentation earlier, as Ridgeway House has been neglected for many, many years, previously by Northamptonshire County Council and since its formation by West Northants Council itself, again, as your report and a cabinet member has just spoken of. For the past 2.5 years or so, West Northants Council has been in discussion with Toaster Town Council about acquiring Toaster Community Centre with a view to building a new care home in Islington Road. However, when we were called to a meeting on the 13th of October, 10 days before you launched your consultation, this was last year, to progress plans completely out of the blue and without any prior consultation, officers said their council had dropped plans for a new care home as they would now be placing Toaster residents in private care homes. At the same time, officers reiterated the council's wish to acquire the community centre site. Cabinet, your report doesn't quantify the costs of finding places in private care homes or identify precisely where these are located. Now, we do know that a private care home in Toaster has been approached with talk of a 2-year agreement. But what would happen at the end of that agreement? And what about Toaster people in need of residential care in future? Where are the alternatives to Ridgeway House? The report estimates repair costs for the next 5 years, but doesn't quantify the additional cost of using private care facilities, as again has been outlined, are greater. It doesn't refer to former plans for the new care home in Toaster either, which I think is it's very poor. So in summary, you're respectfully being urged in the interim to keep Ridgeway House open and revive your previous plans for a new care home in Toaster. To then work with the town council and residents in partnership to find a solution that would provide both value for money and a high standard of care in Toaster for those in the final stages of life to live with dignity, supported by local family and friends locally. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There's quite a lot of points there, very articulately made, Councillor. Thank you. Do we want to pick over some of these? We've got quite a list of speakers. Do we want to see if we can respond to some of these speaker by speaker? There was a few things that Councillor John says, one is about the funding made available. It is true that this council has far less per head to spend on adult social care than most. We are right at the bottom of the league. So that's a fair point.
Chairman, some new points came up tonight which wasn't in the report, which I would be grateful to have answers to. Why no reference to 2.5 years or more of planning for a care home in Toaster then to be dropped prior to the consultation being made?
Yeah, that one we got, didn't we? You mentioned about a new one. Should we answer some of those points? There was a bit that bothered me a bit about the cost of private homes. I think that's an important one to nail. What happens at the end of any agreement? Whereabouts are these homes? Should we pick up some of these and any others that you guys, Matt, Stuart, perhaps a double act on these?
Thank you, Councillor Johns. So I'm just gonna go through the notes that I've made around your questions. So I'm going to start off with the proposed new care home. As you quite rightly described, the council had been working for the last 2.5 years around the feasibility of us building a fully fit for purpose care home in Towcester. Now, when you think about our initial desire to kind of build that setting, that was predicated around the fact that we do have care homes which are reaching the end of their building lives, so to speak. During that 2.5 years, what I can say is culminating in that kind of engagement with you in October, which doesn't sound like it was done very effectively, if I'm honest. Because I think if I'm honest, we probably could have done better in conveying why we have made a decision around not being able to progress that. So if I kind of go through the kind of feasibility of a new care home at the site that you've kind of alluded to, the starting point is that if you look at new care home builds generally range between 70 and 100 units of accommodation for older adults. When we started to look at the capital costs and the capital borrowing in order to build a home of that scale, particularly in the context of the significant increase in building materials that we've seen over the last 2 years, the estimation that we last looked at equated to a 25 million capital requirement in order to build that home. Capital requirement of that scale means the council has probably considerable capital borrowing, which needs to be worked into the rates. So that pushes the rates up. The next factor which changed our expectations around the feasibility was around the change in the demand for adult social care. So in line with national government policy, everywhere across the country is doing everything they can to reduce the number of people who we place into care home settings. And we do that by increasing the amount of support we provide to people within their own homes. The consequence of that is that whilst our numbers of people that we're supporting is increasing, the numbers of people that we're placing in care home settings is reducing. The consequence of that reduction in demand is being felt not just by the council in relation to places that we fund for people, but also the self-funded market. The longer we keep people at home, the more complex their needs become, which means increasingly the staffing levels in these homes starts to increase. So up until summer last year, we were in a position whereby the vast majority of care homes in the South Northants area would only accept self-funder rates. And those self-funder rates were in excess of what the council was willing to pay. As a result of that reduction in demand coming through, some of those care homes ended up with significant vacancies, which meant they've had to fundamentally rethink their business model. We are now in a position where those care homes have actually entered the council's framework contract and are accepting our rates. So when you start to play those different complexities into the position around a future new build, we end up in a position whereby the rate that we can actually deliver care at is significantly higher than our fair cost of care rates. Now, the Fair Cost of Care Rates and Market Sustainability Fund was brought in by government in 2022. And in effect, it meant that all councils were compelled to set rates that they expect the market to deliver at. Now, our historical rates were really low. In residential care terms, they were about 600 quid, which meant very few providers would sign up to those rates. We got levels of grant funding, which allowed us to move those rates through extensive evaluation with providers to 816 quid, as Matt alluded to earlier. The challenge we now have is that having set those rates with providers, having had 57 of the care homes across West Northampton just sign up to those rates, if we as a council can't demonstrate we can deliver at those rates, in many ways, we're undermining our expectation of those providers. And we potentially evoke a legal challenge from those providers around the rates that we're actually paying. So when you play through the capital costs, the change in demand, and the fact that we can't deliver at the rates which the independent sector can, we've ended up in a position whereby the proposed new build in Towcester doesn't stack up financially. We've spent 2.5 years trying to make it work. We've looked at the increased requirements around turning circles for ambulances, which have started to, even because all the right reasons, more complex people are going into care home settings. But fundamentally, we can't get the finances to stack up in a way that's not going to create a cost burden to the council and to local people. So I do apologise that we haven't had that opportunity to go through with the town council that level of detail, because in reflection, we should have had that opportunity to do that. In relation to the notion of a 2-year agreement pertaining to a local home, I'm not aware that the council has entered into any discussions with a care home for a 2-year agreement. That's not something we would do. When we work with people, we have a contract in place with that care home, and we have an expectation that that provider, upon accepting that person and the assessment of their needs, is able to continue to support that person as long as their needs remain stable. When that person's needs start to change, we have a conversation with that provider around whether there's additionality of funding we need to provide, or whether continuing healthcare is available to them. So I'm not cognizant of any negotiation we've got into. What I can say is, as it stands, there are 13 care homes within 5 miles of Towcester. There's one in Towcester which has got sufficient vacancies to accommodate all 11 of the existing residents at Ridgeway who want to remain within the Towcester area. We will do everything we can from a social work perspective to work with people to mitigate and diminish the impact of moving them, but I can confirm that there is sufficient provision that is sustainable within the market for us to accommodate those people. From an affordability perspective, the homes that we're working with are operating on the council's care home framework, so that they're working at that £861 rate. So it's cheaper than what we're currently delivering the service for at Ridgeway. And that issue at Ridgeway fundamentally is around the fact that we can't, because of the building, get the occupancy levels up. The crux of it for new people coming in is there aren't toilets in the rooms. And I accept that's a challenging set of circumstances, but it has. But that doesn't mean that we don't at some point have to draw a line and say this doesn't stack up and it's not working.
I mean, the fact that it's gone on for years is the reason why there are very few occupants there, because people, when offered the choice, don't choose Ridgeway, do they? It's a valid point, because it's been outside of legislation for 20 years. As an
Chairman,
existing
it's been
site.
run down.
Huh?
It's been run down for years. There's been no improvements.
Yeah.
Northampton County Council, years ago proposed closure.
Yeah.
And no improvements have been made since.
Yeah.
So it
Time.
was always going to be a case that you were going to close it because you just hadn't invested in it.
Yeah.
And why you spent 2.5 years investigating without, because the town council was told to keep this confidential. And there's nothing in the report that mentions any of this, is there? Is there?
Well, the development of a new
Of a new care home?
care home. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Well,
the
I think
council that.
Stuart has explained the
It was
maths
the
and
council, yeah,
the
but it was
reasoning
the
behind it.
council that came to Towcester Town Council. It wasn't the town council's idea of a care home. It was your own.
But
plans.
with due respect, there are 2 separate issues at play. So one is Ridgeway House, one is the capacity for care home provision within Towcester. For me to kind of include within this report that pertains to potentially us moving 15 people, to have significant narrative pertaining to a new build is if I'm honest, is not an appropriate way to structure that report. So I accept that in relation to our engagement with the town council, we could have done better around that. But this report is around and pertains to the proposed closure of Ridgeway. But again, the decision we're putting forward to Cabinet pertains to the insufficiency of provision at Ridgeway House. The capacity for future provision is a separate decision.
If we could build one and operate it cheaper, we would. Thank you, Martin, for your questions. I think Matt wanted to make one last comment on some of the points raised by Councillor Johns, didn't you?
Well, all I'd add is the point around dignity and locally, and I think we've covered that, but there's certainly a commitment from us and officers going back to how we dealt with people at Boniface House to make sure we are offering as much dignity as we possibly can, working with residents and the families to get the best outcome we possibly can. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. 5 more speakers. Our next is Councillor Samiotis. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm actually quite worried about getting old now, needing a care home. I don't know where I'm going to be. Definitely won't be in Towcester, will I? So, as you can probably gather by now, Towcester residents and the Town Council are outraged at the proposal to close Ridgeway House. What we want to know is where the current residents will be relocated. We've just heard within 5 miles. That's not good enough. You can't even get a bus to Daventry from here to visit family. A lot of the people's in these homes, one of them is over 100. Her daughter is 80. She doesn't drive. How's she supposed to see her mum? You really need to be thinking about these people and where they're going to be living out their last years and moving them away from their family, from their homes, where they've lived forever, some of them. It's just disgraceful. So I really do hope that you make that provision available in Towcester, where you said that could happen. What are the plans if Ridgeway House closes with the site? Are you going to be building more housing there? In which case, will this be social housing? Or would you consider plans to create a further facility or parking in order to help with the current healthcare providers in the town, given that the original plan to provide the town with another medical practice on the southern urban extension was quashed, even though the town desperately needs more medical facilities? One of the first requests of WNC to Towcester Town Council and others was asset mapping in order to establish what WNC owned. Am I correct in thinking that it's WNC's plan to pick these sites off one by one, which includes Ridgeway House, and sell them to the highest bidder? And if so, will all of the proceeds of these sites be reinvested into the town, perhaps to build a new care home?
Okay, I'll hand you over to make some of those points. I think we're all worried about getting old, Lisa. I don't think that's a place where you'd put your grandmother. I certainly wouldn't put mine. Some of those are, they take a fair point about lack of maintenance, but you're still dealing with a place that has no bathroom, that has no ensuite bathrooms, narrow corridors, and is outdated, irrespective of what you do. Were you to refurbish it to a reasonable standard, you'd have to move the residents out anyway. So I think there's a number of points here that, worth bearing in mind. You two guys may want to pick up some further points. Stuart, Matt, over to you.
Well, I think we already explained how careful and diligent we want to be around moving people, and we've already talked about trying to keep people as local as we possibly can. In terms of the site, we recognise there'll be a vacant site there, and I've spoken to Stuart about how if we haven't had plans come forward within 6 months, we bring an item back to Cabinet to talk about how we're going to dispose of it. And obviously, as a local member myself, I would prefer that we could see that site being reinvested into the local community for either, some sort of future health asset or whatever the local community need. But obviously, we'll need to get best value out of that, and we'll do what we can to get the best result for the community. Thank you.
Stuart, you want to add something?
Thank you. So just 2 points. So first up, we would be looking to allocate a social worker to each person so that we can understand their circumstances, needs of their families, in order to make sure that we can do as much as we can to mitigate that impact. The other point that I wanted to kind of make is Ridgeway is a residential care home. At the point at which any of the existing residents have and develop nursing levels of need, they would have to move. So we're in a scenario currently whereby I can't put my hand up and say, even if this all stacked up, that those people could continue to live there forever. The constraints within the registration mean that if people's needs deteriorate, we would have to move. So when you look at what we're proposing, in many ways, what we're trying to do is be proactive and support people when there is a level of stability to move, as opposed to moving at the point of crisis. I accept that this is going to have implications for people, but fundamentally, it doesn't stack up for us to continue to support people in this home.
Just a quick
So-
point on the site. Sorry, let me just one of your previous points. Just a quick word on the site. There is
Yeah.
no clear plan, and part of the reason for that is this decision needs to stand on its own. This is not about that offset against whether we could do something else. The use of the land will then be determined on the basis of best value for the taxpayer, community need, and so on. You mentioned medical centres, really open to that discussion. Actually, there are two issues with medical shortages. Sometimes, as you get on new housing developments, there may be Section 106 money for medical services, but no GP practice that will take it on. That's the one that is difficult for us to solve. But where you have a lack of medical services, but you have a local GP business that's keen to expand, we'll have the conversation with them. We'll have the conversation about this site, or we'll have the conversation about other opportunities. If a GP business is ready to expand, get them to talk to us. We'll support to help them to do that. Sorry, you had one further point you wanted to make, I think, Lisa.
I was just going to say that you're just not going to 100% say that these residents were staying in Towcester. We know there is a care home in Towcester that does provide needs for,
I'll commit to have that conversation with that care home.
you will?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Which one is that? Do we know the name of that one? Brook. Yeah. Brook House has got 10 vacancies at the moment, hasn't it? So that might be one to discuss. Okay, thank you, Councillor Samiotis. We've next got Councillor Beardsworth. Sally, welcome. Welcome back.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to the arguments well tonight, because to me, it seems that social services is in a mess everywhere, not just here. Okay, social services is a mess everywhere. We had a Prime Minister that said he had a plan for social services. Nothing's come into fruition. I think that was 3 or 4 Prime Ministers back. But the whole point is we have an aging population. I have to declare an interest. I'm one of them. And I just don't know what's going to happen to me when I get older. We have services that you can't get staff to work in. We've got so many vacancies that we can't. The government is trying to get people to come back to work, come off benefits. Can you imagine having somebody that's been on benefits all their life coming in and looking after an elderly person? I really, really have huge concerns about some of the things that are going on. You say you put people into nursing homes. I hope it won't be a 2-tier system, because I worked in a nursing home when I was nursing years ago, and one woman who was paying her way, she ran out of money, so the council took her up on her books. And the owner said, we don't buy any more sweets for her because we don't get any extra money for her now. So this is the sort of thing that goes on. And if people aren't careful, we'll end up with a 2-tier system in our residential care for people. And I really have worries about that. The place you're closing, we closed another place a few years ago called the Evelyn Wright Home. I don't think anything's been done with it yet. What's happening? We just sit on properties and don't let anything happen to them. Why as a council, we aren't selling off these places or actually converting them into housing? I don't know. I totally agree that the town council has been very badly let down by the lack of communication from West Northants. And I really think it's a real problem that we aren't taking people along with us. We've always said that we shouldn't be doing things to people. We should be doing them with people. And I think that's something we should all learn from this, that we've promised people a new residential home. That's not going to happen. I can understand the arguments, but you can find £20 million for part of a road in Kingsthorpe, but you can't find £21 million for a home for older people. It just doesn't sound as though people care as much as they should do. I really worry about care in the community, whether we get enough staff. As I said, we've got an aging population. I think a lot of people, there's a huge rise in the over 70s next year. And I don't know how many of those people will need help in their own home to stay in their own home. And I really worry about that and getting the staff to look after them with the right training. So I feel badly for the people that are going to be messed about in the time of their lives and they shouldn't be, and move to another accommodation. And I know, and you know, and I know Stuart knows, that moving people at that age isn't always good for their health. So I really do have worries and concerns, and I do understand the reasoning. We just don't have enough money from central government to make this work. And unless we write to our MPs and tell them that this is happening, with the cuts we've had over the years, we cannot do what we should be doing for our old people in our community. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at with urgency. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. A couple of things I'll come back on. The 20 million road in Kingsthorpe was an essential part of building 2,000 homes. You and I often have debates about the need to build more homes. Some of those are social homes, so there was no choice. It's not an either or spend on niceties. People at Toast have promised a care home. I may have misunderstood. I think what Councillor Johns was saying is that you were asked, the town council were asked to keep that confidential. And I think the very reason for that is, as soon as you start making promises, you need to make sure you've got all your ducks in a row before you start announcing things like that. We clearly didn't get our ducks in a row because it didn't stack up. So no promises have been made that have been broken. I don't think we sit on properties. We've got a massive project for moving ahead and making the best of properties, both in terms of the financial return that they need to bring so that we can invest in services, not in keeping properties going. And the reports later will show that, you know, we're moving on that with our office and so on. The rest of it on the other side was fairly national politics, Matt, but I don't know if there's anything you do want to pick up that Sally mentioned.
Well, just to agree, we made no promises whatsoever. I think it's totally wrong of Councillor Beardsworth to suggest that in the first place. What we did was be very diligent around the viability of the potential for building something new, which, as we've proven so far, isn't viable. And we talk about funding and our responsibility for the public purse that we have control over. And at this current point in time, it's not something that we can progress. Thank you.
Anything further to answer, or has that covered it on Sally? We'll move on to our next speaker. Yeah, happy to. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sally. Councillor Harris, Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you. Evening, councillors. Much has already been said, so there isn't really much need for me to repeat a lot of that. I'd like to thank Councillor Johns for coming along and giving his views very passionately from a Toaster perspective, and also to thank Stuart for his clarity around the way that you position those things. Nationally, I believe we've lost something like 14,000 care home beds. So my concern is where this is all heading in the long term. And I guess my frustration is that I'm not clear what the long-term strategy looks like for care. I guess we've already heard, most of us don't from a national point of view. We do have an aging population, that's a fact, and that's a reality. And yes, there is a trend towards care at home, but that won't work for everybody. That is not going to be a solution for everybody. So I would like to ask if we can, and Stuart may already have this in hand, along with Councillor Golby, a long-term vision or strategy for what care looks like for West Northamptonshire, which includes the future provision for care homes. So if it's there, I think it'd be great if we can see it or have a briefing on it. If it's not, can we have some input and some contribution to that? Because, you know, we are all getting older. And Councillor Nunn says we should be concerned about getting older. I agree, we all should be, because it's one inevitability for most of us that we'll have to deal with. This is the second one, obviously, having experienced the closure of Boniface in my own ward. And yes, they're out of date. They become out of date, as we've already heard, because we haven't invested in them. And I think that's the other thing we need to get to grips with those care homes that we still do have that are under council tenure. What are we doing with them to make sure that we are keeping them up to standard, and what does that look like? And again, I think that should be part of the clarity of this longer term strategy. I was pleased to hear Councillor Goby talking about Ridgeway and the potential for looking at how it might be used within the local community. I hope the same applies to Brixworth. I see Simon over in the background there. Simon, I'm looking to come and knock on your door, as you know, because I think that is one way that certainly the communities will feel, if they can feel positive about it in any shape or form, will be about how it can be reutilised for the community in some shape or form. So my concern is strategy. What does that look like for the future? I don't think it's appropriate for us to just be shifting to a private sector model, as Councillor Beardsworth has said. I think that gives us all of us some potential worries. And we know that there is a cost differential there. So strategy is the key for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Any comments at all? A quick outline of the situation on strategy and so on, perhaps?
Thank you. So in relation to strategy, we are just revisiting all of the council's market position statements. So those are the key messages that we convey both to public and to our providers pertaining to the demand we envisage to see over forthcoming years. What's made this particularly tricky is it would be fair to say that there has been a volatility within adult social care as a result of the pandemic, which has fundamentally changed some of the assumptions that we previously had in place. That market position statement revision will also be undertaken alongside the launch of an adult social care prevention strategy, which is designed to do as much as we can to prevent, reduce and delay the need for adult social care. It's primarily orientated around supporting people to remain independent within their own homes. It would be really helpful to have member engagement and discussion as part of both the revision of the market position statement and the prevention strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. We'll go to the cabinet in a minute, but I think Adam wanted to make a quick comment, reference one of the comments of Councillor Harris, didn't you, Adam?
Yeah, simply because I think we've heard for the second time tonight about lack of historic investment in Ridgeway House, and that potentially causing the need for closure now. I think we need to recognise that in a lot of buildings, particularly those buildings of a certain era, you can't simply knock down walls, you can't reconfigure them without massive expense. The buildings naturally, especially those of that era, come to the end of their useful life. And whilst there are aesthetic issues that can be overcome with some modest investment, that the kind of reconfiguration that would be required to bring Ridgeway House up to the modern day standard is either impossible or would come at such a huge cost that we would again run into viability issues. So I think that's a misdiagnosis on the part of the two speakers who have brought that up thus far.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. One of the several points I took away from a meeting with Dame Andrea Leadsom, who's raising the petition against this proposal and closure, was the possibility of converting those unused bedrooms into ensuite bathrooms. In other words, 3 bedrooms in a row, split the middle one in 2 to make ensuite bathrooms for each. But actually, when you look at the space available, when you look at the viability of the costs, which we've had costing options run up, when you look at the fact that actually you'd have to move people out for that level of building anyway, I would have loved that to work out, but we couldn't make it stack up any which way. Did you want to come back in there, Matt?
Just to support Adam's comments there. If you look at Turn Furlong, which is a totally different site, it's being used almost to I'm not sure what it's much nearer capacity than any of the other homes that we have, and it's relatively modern and it's got room for manoeuvre in it. As Adam mentioned, Ridgeway, if you have a good look around it, it's got acute turn-ins in it. You can barely pass somebody in the corridor. It's just out of date and out of fashion. Thank you.
Part of that reflects the trend that generally we look to keep people living independently at home. So perhaps when it was first built, you'd get people moving in who had reached a certain age, but they were still quite physically able. No longer is that the case. The preference is to keep people at home as long as we possibly can. Sorry, Mike, I think you want to come in with a point.
Yeah, just a quick comment, as I think Adam was mentioning there about moving people out, and we've heard that it's not that recommended to move people out, but actually if we were refurbishing, not only would we have to move them out, So move them once, which we'd have to do if we close a home anyway. We actually have to move them twice, because then in theory they would move back in. So I think that represents more of a risk in destabilising if you're moving people twice rather than once.
Thanks, Mike. Right, back to our speakers. Apologies to Councillor Roberts, who's next, Emma. We wanted to take this really carefully and make sure points weren't missed. And sometimes if you get 6 or 7 speakers in a row, you might miss something. So that's the reason for trying to pick through this carefully. Welcome, Emma. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's important to firstly note that those making this decision this evening, or most of them, wouldn't have been part of what I do believe is lack of investment over a considerable period of time, nor would the officers who were currently proposing the report to us. So I think it's important to recognise that. But I'm really sad to see another council-owned care home being closed and a public service being moved into potentially private care. These folks are going to end up receiving private care. I'd like to make a few points on the contents of the report. So 2.1 talks about staffing issues. I'd like to make a suggestion that whilst they're detailed as long-standing, when you've got a closure of a care home looming, when you're not investing in a home, you are going to find it difficult to find the workforce. So we are responsible for that, is my view. We've also got lots of information in the report talking about condition and how we can't do anything about the home and we can't make it any better. And I accept Councillor Brown's comments about the difficulty with ageing buildings, but if we'd have looked at it 20 years ago, if we'd have looked at it 10 years ago, there may have been things that could have been done differently. Councillor Hallam's point about having to move people twice, if we'd have done that 10 years ago, we might have had vacancies where there was only 2 or 3 people, 5 or 10 in the building. Things would have been different. The fact that we've not looked at this earlier and not looked at the investment is the issue here, and the reason we're seeing another public service closed. And we have to be frank that we've seen the ideological and managed decline of public service care homes across the country for years and years. And my fear is just how many more of our council-run services we're going to close as part of this process. It's a prime example of this happening, and it's happened all across the country. The investment that's detailed at 2.6 works out a relatively small sum year on year. So the protection of the current residents, I think, is really crucial when we look at that investment that's needed just to manage the service as is, particularly when a councillor behind talked about somebody being over 100 living in there. I mean, we have to look at the human rights impact here. So the report talks about really good quality provision of care. These residents are going to be displaced potentially out of the area, because I appreciate Stuart's comments around the location and Matt's comments around the locations of surrounding care homes. There's nothing in the report that details that at all. They're going to be in less familiar places, receiving less familiar care, and it can be hugely detrimental to life. The report suggests that a significant number of respondents disagreed with the closure, but my view is that the report completely ignores this. I think the Cabinet should consider 7.2.3, because it states that Cabinet may lawfully take such decisions for closure if it conscientiously considers the outcomes of the consultation. The report says that almost everybody who responded disagreed, and how you can say, therefore, that closure conscientiously considers the contents of the consultation, I'm not so sure. The respondents are being ignored, as are the speakers this evening, and I wholly object to the closure of this care home, as does the Labour group. It is not conscientiously considered the views of residents. I'd also like to point out 7.2.5 of the report and the infringement on human rights. Cabinet is asked to wholeheartedly consider that point by the officer writing the report. I do hope it truly does, and not just say that this is too difficult for us to manage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Emma. I think protecting the current residents is the absolute nub of this, isn't it? Let's be honest, new residents aren't choosing this place. They haven't for some time. Were we to modify it, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? When might you have shut the place to refurbish it? I think we're now at the point where we just think the standards, the world's moved on to far better standards. Perhaps there's been some kicking the can down the road with previous councils or whatever. Maybe it could have been done well before now. We kind of are where we are, aren't we? Accepting that. And I think protecting current residents is the absolute, and it's an important issue to all of us. And please be assured of that. Please also be assured that there's not much that anybody's raised this evening that we haven't always asked as well. We've had numerous discussions on this. As Councillor Golby says in the last day, so he and I have visited the place because I had only gone by what I heard, and I thought the public interest meant I ought to see this, and I explored the whole thing, not just the visitor areas in a small part of the downstairs, but the whole area, the annex that's been shut off because it's impractical, the upstairs that's not currently used because it's impractical, the whole site. We've had a thorough look round, so we have raised these points, and on the balance, we have come to the view that this is still now the way ahead. As nobody would put a new resident in there, or no new resident would choose it, this is about the protection of those who are currently there. So perhaps we just hand over, you may have picked up a few points, Stuart and Matt, on that last bit, if you would like to answer some of Emma's points, but also perhaps we just focus a bit more on the current residents. Is that fair to ask you?
So first up, in relation to human rights, then the consideration of the human rights of the existing residents has got to be central to what we do. When we look at the human rights of those individuals, we've got to consider the consequence of the decision we're proposing, but also the consequence of us not taking action in this area. And from the work we've done today, the impact of us not taking action potentially will have worse outcomes from people than us actually taking forward a planned and proactive safe closure program, which allows us to work with people at the point at which they're stable. We need to consider and understand people's rights to a normal life and the full extent of the Human Rights Act in that regard. From a consultation perspective, this is always going to be difficult because all of the 15 residents and their families are always going to say they want to continue with the status quo. In many ways, people who have lived in the service probably have got used to the service. They might not know and expect anything different. I think we have a responsibility to aspire for more and to kind of work with them. When we've looked at the consultation responses, yes, they are challenging of the recommendations we're taking forward, but they also set out clear kind of anxieties from families in particular around our ability to keep people within the Towcester area. And that has got to be absolutely central to the approach that we take forward in how we work with people. When we work with people, the kind of process that we would undertake would be very much around, as I've alluded to, allocating a social worker. That social worker would spend time with the person, with their family. They would complete both a Community Care Act assessment and a support plan. That support plan, we write those support plans from a strengths-based perspective, and it's constructed around what's best and person-centered in relation to how we meet that person's needs. We need to be really clear about the role and requirements of families. So carers assessments will be completed alongside that, even though they're not formally recognised as carers because a person's in a care home. We've got that responsibility to have a look at things like that. The other bit is about some of the things that we might be able to do to kind of reduce some of the impact on this. So we know that across the 15 residents at Ridgeway, there will be people who spend a lot of time together. There are people who have friends within that service, and we need to recognise that. And where possible, we would look to co-locate people in proposed moves. As I've said, we would look as much as we can to mitigate the impact on families around travel. And some of that is about us actively engaging with those 13 providers that we have within the South Northants area to make sure that we make best use of that provision. However way we cut this is difficult. The challenge that I have is that as a care home that has the first floor that's been in effect closed for a considerable period of time, with the annex being closed, with reducing numbers of people. So the report talks about 17 people living in the home. Sadly, before Christmas, 2 people passed away, which means we're down to 15. The consequence of that is that staff quite rightly start to get concerned about the security of their jobs. And my experience in this kind of area is that when those numbers of people really start to reduce, we start to end up with situations whereby staff quite rightly start moving on to other jobs. We end up in a situation then where we have an over-reliance on agency because it's difficult for us to recruit in, which means I then end up with a presenting situation whereby The registered manager's phoning me to say, Stuart, we've got a rota and I've got nobody to cover the morning shifts for the next week. And I absolutely envisage that if we don't take this action, that's the sort of scenario that we will end up in. In that scenario, my ability to be proactive and to work with families is significantly diminished. It will be about what we can do to kind of prop things up in order to take action. So I absolutely appreciate that this is difficult, but I'd much rather be in a proactive position than dealing with crisis, because my ability to mitigate the impact is significantly diminished if we do this in crisis. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Matt?
Yeah, I just want to pick up on a couple of things. Emma mentioned the ideology behind this, and I've got to completely guarantee that nothing about this decision is in any way ideological. It's around a set of circumstances that we're presented with, and we have to balance that provision of care with what we have, and also try and meet the needs of residents as well. And just on the consultation as well, the consultation where people did highlight their concerns around the safe closure programme, they did recognise that the facilities within the home needed to improve. The Fabricum facilities within the home did need to improve, and that was also recognised in the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we have a last speaker on this, which is Councillor Purser. Bob.
Thank you, Chair. I think all the points that I was going to raise have been raised. Particularly associate myself with Councillor John's comments. I think they're very pertinent. I think we have to focus on the views of the residents and of their families and of our staff. And I think we've got a very difficult task now to take from today. And I don't envy the cabinet in their position and our staff in this situation. I am very concerned that we seem not able to provide care homes for older people in the public sector, that the finances, how we've got to a situation where that has been allowed to happen by government just shows the level of neglect that's happened over the last 10 years in bringing forward a proper policy for the care sector. And I think it's an indictment of our society that we're here. So those are my comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Thank you for your comments. I had a list which we'd asked for information on the provision within the nearby radius. We had this list refreshed last week. I didn't know until it was just mentioned just now that one that's in Towcester is Brook House. So I've no connection with this place. I note though that it's got 10 available places and that it's rated by the ECQC as good, so its performance is better. It looks as though it does a broader range of care. If a resident were to deteriorate, Stuart, and they were in Brook House, they would be able to move on to their next level of care, which they couldn't at Ridgeway at the moment. Is that fair to say? So those who perhaps are suddenly lost, pass away altogether. Okay, they may end their days in Ridgeway, but as many do, they deteriorate to a greater level of nursing. They couldn't do that at Ridgeway. They would have to move elsewhere. If they were in Brook House, they would be able to continue there. Yeah, the assurance on the fact that they would have, if you, I know, sort of security of tenure, if you like, they could move to this and a number of others. We have no preference here. I know this one is in Towcester, and that's why it's important, that local connection, I understand, family to visit and all the rest of it. The council would place them within Brook House or one of the others, no charge to them, no uncertainty about them staying there. They would be paid by the council, and their arrangements in terms of financial contributions or anything else, and their certainty and security would be no different to where they are at the moment. I think I've had that assurance. Just asked you to make that publicly. That's correct. So you're assuring me that would make no difference. They could relocate to this or one of the others in the area if they had an alternative preference, perhaps their family are in one of the villages nearby. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to get that assurance. I know Cabinet earlier had a few questions. Some of them had started to air a few of those questions. We'll go around now and see if they still have remaining concerns. Adam, was there anything else you wanted to come in on?
Yeah, firstly to say that we're grateful to Stuart and Matt for just outlining very succinctly how we're able to achieve that conscientious consideration of those consultation results in weighing up the decision tonight. And it's important to bear in mind that there's also an awful lot of other evidence that we have to weigh up in coming to our decision. Nobody comes into the roles that we occupy with an ambition to close a care home or anything like that. Unfortunately, it's the kind of difficult issue that you have to grapple with when you're in administration. We've touched on the issue that I want to explore to some extent throughout the speakers and the responses this evening, but just want to explore the availability of care home places, particularly in the South Northamptonshire area, and ask possibly Stuart more so than Matt if we have had any complaints or if we know of any identified difficulties from members of the public in finding care home places for relatives.
So within the People Directorate, within Adult Social Care, we have a commissioning team. That commissioning team do a significant amount of work with local providers, not just in South Northants, but across our patch, around working with them to understand the levels of demand that we see coming through. As part of this in preparation for the recommendation to Cabinet tonight, we've actively engaged with our commissioning teams, and we haven't had any specific complaints raised pertaining to the capacity for care home provision in the local area. Historically, we have had particular challenges around domiciliary care, particularly around the rural areas. But the big domiciliary care contract that we retendered last year is now being mobilised, which means we're not struggling in the same way we did previously in order to provide support for people. So we're confident that we have sufficient capacity in place in order to meet today's demand. The market position statement that I alluded to earlier will be that document that starts to structure out how, for example, we will hope to manage the increase in over 75. So we expect to see over the next 5 years, because it's quite significant for our area. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. There was some suggestion about somewhere that the consultation is partly covered. I think Emma asked something about consultation, but there was a bit that's missing possibly. Some suggestions of whether that happened over Christmas, or that we hadn't allowed the full normal time or anything. Was it a full normal consultation? When did it happen?
So the consultation ran from the 23rd of October through for 28 days. So that consultation was in line with the council's policy and position around that. The volume of responses that we actually got to the consultation, actually for an adult social care decision is quite a decent amount. It's considerably higher than what we received for the service at Boniface. The consultation itself was advertised in the public domain. We also had an opportunity to speak to a number of key stakeholders and engage with staff, family and residents directly. So we're confident that the approach was robust, but it didn't take place over Christmas.
Okay, thank you. Any other Cabinet questions at all? Fiona, over to you.
I just wanted to say that we have been over this over many hours in great detail and have asked many of the questions that have been asked here by our colleagues this evening. I was particularly sceptical, as our leader knows, but I have been persuaded that this is the best way forward. But I want reassurance that those people will not be forced into a place just because we've got a space, and that they will have the opportunity to have relatives view that space to make sure they're happy with their family member taking residence there. And all efforts will be made for those residents who have family in Towcester remaining in a home in Towcester, because as Councillor Samiotis said, in the rural areas, we have the most rubbish bus service. So nobody that can't drive is going to be able to get out of Towcester. So I'd just like reassurance of that, please.
Yeah, who would answer that? Where that slightly ties in is, of course, there is no fixed. We've had a look at what's within 5 miles because that sort of makes a bit of sense as being the options, but they're limited to nothing, are they? So some of the residents were from Northampton. They've moved back to Northampton into care facilities in Northampton, haven't they? So there's no limit or preference. They've got the full choice ahead of them. Sorry, Stuart, over to you.
Just to affirm that we haven't got any preconceived plans on where people would go. It's very much about how we work with people on an individual basis. If people and their families express a wish to move over to Northampton, then we would look at how we support that. If people put forward a wish and expectation to stay within Towcester, then we'll do as much as we can to enable that to happen. And obviously families are central to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, I think you were going to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, my original question has actually been comprehensively answered, which was about the cost of providing a new care home. But I was just going to make the observation that actually experience of being a New Zealander and living in the UK is that actually provision of older care in the UK is quite unsophisticated. Actually, the provision in Australia, New Zealand, the States, there's a recognition that age comes upon us all, and the provision of good quality care homes is paramount, whether it's in the private sector and probably in those countries to a lesser extent in the state sector, although the state sector is very, very important. But thinking about our where we're going with our local plan, this is an area that we have been discussing, is the provision of older care and the recognition that as part of our planning process, we are going to have to recognise the incredible increase in old people requiring care by an institution, and looking at how we do provide that through our local plan. Because it's not just limited to Ridgeway House, Boniface House, it's a problem across society, and it's something that none of us really want to think about, and it's coming an awful lot faster as you get older. You know, when you're 20, you think it's forever away, and then suddenly when you're not 20 anymore, it's an awful lot closer. So it's a real problem, and I've been much comforted by the debate here and listening to the speakers and listening to the responses. We have discussed it at length before this evening, but hearing the detail that comes from people from outside looking in and the questions that they can pose that perhaps we haven't thought of as Cabinet has been really interesting. And I am comforted that the best attention is going to be paid to the residents, and the outcomes for them is actually paramount in thinking of officers and I think in Cabinet. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rebecca. Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. My comments are around your concern as well, and I think we all share that around the existing residents. I know the idea has been mentioned tonight, and I think it was mentioned in correspondence with the Member of Parliament for South Northamptonshire over a major refurb, do the major investment that it needs. But it's clear to me that that major investment would lead to 2 moves for those people that are in there, a move out and then a move back in. And that concerns me, it is even more of a worry than to move in them once.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. We've established that with more certainty, haven't we? And not only that, a move out to somewhere different for a temporary location while building work happens, and then a move back in. But of course, we also know that if their care needs increase, they move out to somewhere else as well, as this wouldn't provide it. So it is potentially, perhaps for a small number of remaining years, someone's life, quite a few chops and changes. Matt, did you want to comment on that or something different, perhaps?
No, it was just before you wrap it up, Leader, just to thank Cabinet colleagues for their comments. And as we all know, as a Cabinet group, we've spent a lot of time, as has been said this evening, on the matter of Ridgeway House. We've requested lots of other detail. We've made sure we've gone out and looked at the place, and just to welcome that, and also the comments and challenge from other members and speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. No, I think there's things we've raised that actually haven't come up tonight. I look at the notes I've made in the various discussions we've had, and there are further points, further options, possibilities that we've explored. I think we'll listen carefully to everybody's points. Thank you to all those who've contributed and raised excellent points. We wholeheartedly understand why those points are raised. They are the same points in many cases we have raised. the end of the discussion now, we come forward to ask Cabinet to agree the recommendations. The recommendations, as always, are shown in section 3. If I may please, with the assurances that we've had, including above all, complete care and consideration for those existing residents. It seems to be everybody's top priority. With those assurances in place, can I ask Cabinet please to confirm your agreement to the recommendations? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. That takes us on to item 9. That is interim bus policy. In Councillor Larratt's absence, I've got a few notes from him, so I'll do a quick introduction on this policy. We then have 4 speakers. First of all, Councillor Daniel Sohn from Northampton Town Council, Councillor Jonathan Harris, Councillor Keith Hollandella Mayor, and Councillor Bob Purser. So this paper seeks Cabinet approval for the adoption of a proposed interim bus policy. The policy was a recommendation from the bus network review that we've undertaken during the past year. It's needed to guide our activity and decision-making over the next 12 months. This is particularly important given the continuing challenges facing the bus industry, which were outlined in our bus network review report and includes passenger numbers which are still down on pre-COVID levels. There's cost inflation and also driver shortages. The policy wording is in section 5.4 of the report. This recognises the vital role public transport plays in serving our communities and the council's priorities for supporting our local public transport system. The policy is interim, as it will be superseded by the policy content of the new local transport plan, which is currently in development and due for adoption this time next year. The paper explains how the council budget for this bus network support has grown significantly during 2023, with additional government grant of nearly 3.8 million now having been allocated across this financial year and next. The new policy, bus network review that informs it, and the enhanced partnership we have in place with operators will guide how we spend this funding with the objective to grow bus patronage and improve services. Given we have no certainty of funding beyond April 2025, we'll need to invest wisely in bus service improvements so that these improvements have every chance of being sustained beyond the next 12 months. The public consultation on the bus policy shows the council priorities are well supported. I, Councillor Larratt, believes that the buses member working group have also, I understand from Councillor Larratt that the buses member working group have also reviewed this policy and document. Working with our enhanced partnership, we will seek to address other feedback we received during the consultation. This included the identification of particular gaps in our bus network and other service improvements, which we will seek to address. Feedback also highlighted the valuable services being provided by community transport providers, and we'll seek to support these further in future to meet accessibility issues, particularly in our rural areas, which are challenging to be served by traditional bus services. Okay, at that point, let's go over to our speakers. First one being Councillor Daniel Sohn of Northampton Town Council. Daniel, welcome.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you very much for extending the courtesy, but this evening I'm not speaking in my capacity as a town councillor. So just wanted to make that clear. Chair, Cabinet, I thank Cabinet this evening for the opportunity to speak on item 9, the interim bus policy. I'm here this evening to speak up for the residents of West Hunsbury and East Hunsbury who have told me how important public transport is for them to go about their daily lives. This is backed up by the specific mention of the area in the report in the Cabinet papers. I note from the report this evening that the number 88 and the 12 and 12A that run through the area are currently rated as amber, therefore at risk of decommission in the local transport network report. Add to this the new housing going up in the Northampton South Sustainable Urban Extension, and it's clear that this is an area in need of review when the council considers the local transport plan. Chair, it is a matter of great personal sadness to me that the bus stop on Ladybridge Drive, that a much loved relative of mine used regularly to go about her business, no longer has a bus service. I know how much of a lifeline it was to her and other local people. It is residents such as her that I'm here to represent today. Local public transport is a great enabler for independence, for young people going to and from school or college to take advantage of opportunity, working residents travelling to and from work to fulfil their ambition, and older people maintaining a healthy and independent lifestyle. The ability to stay mobile for those who don't drive, don't cycle, and can't walk long distances is so much more important than simply getting from A to B. It's not just about getting to the shops, to school, to work, or to the doctors. It's about well-being. It's about the ability to meet friends and family face to face, to experience human interaction. And we all felt the absence of human interaction during the COVID years. The impact of that most basic human needs crept into our lives. Isolation does not recognise age, gender, or postcode. As well as supporting independence and well-being, regular bus routes provide an alternative to other modes of transport, namely the use of private motor cars, so that those who wish to make the switch can do. So tonight I urge you to include a substantial focus on the requirements of the residents of West Hunsbury and East Hunsbury over the next 12 months as you consider the wider implications of the new local transport plan. To consider most seriously all options when it comes to linking residents from all corners of East Hunsbury and Shelfleys Ward to those places and people that are of importance to them, to improve independence, well-being, and our local environment. Residents do not merely want a public transport service. For all the reasons I've outlined and more, they need a public transport service.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate it. Next speaker then, Councillor Jonathan Harris. Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, councillors. I must admit, I didn't think I'd be starting my section with this, but I'd like to congratulate Councillor Soane on using this as an opportunity for an election pitch. I've never heard any of the existing Conservative councillors speak up for the bus services before, but there we are. We are in an election period. I want to start by making a connection, if I may. I'd like to thank officers, specifically who are working on the 5960 bus tendering process for me, which is linked obviously to this as an interim bus policy. I am concerned we are short of time on that. I specific request, I don't know whether it would be possible to see the tender document once it goes out. I don't know whether that's feasible, Stuart. I haven't seen it yet, but it would be good just to get a sense of that when it's live. And just a little bit of context around this, the importance of buses. I was at Thornby last night, which is a small parish meeting, but the room's full, around 20 people, and they wholeheartedly voted to continue to support their contribution to the 5960 bus. So I think it signifies the importance of these buses, particularly in rural areas. Now, an interim bus policy or otherwise only works if we've got buses. And Councillor Baker, actually the last item referred to, I think he described it as rubbish buses in rural areas, which many of us would often have to agree with, I would say. Now, my specific points are in 6.4 of the report, it does refer to these additional funds, and I know that those funds aren't going to be there for a long period of time, but it would be really helpful if we could get clarity on how that will be utilised specifically. Again, I speak as a rural ward councillor. In my lap, it's very clearly been identified that we have rural connectivity issues and isolation issues. So I will do everything that I can to make sure that we keep our buses and grow and enhance them. In item 6.3, it relates to the ENCTS. And again, it talks about there being some further analysis or work being undertaken to look at the impact of that. Could we have an update on progress on this? I'm specifically interested to know how many people actually have bus passes, so that we can get some sense of that utilisation. On my final point, 7.6.1 refers to climate impacts, and it talks about more people using buses, less impact on climate. Of course, in principle, that's correct. But I specifically want to raise, and I hope this is something we can feature in the longer term in the local transport plan, the opportunity to think about decarbonisation of bus fleets. I know this is something we've discussed. We've referred it into the sustainability group. And there is a useful report from the LGA which talks about that particular issue. But I really do think from a council's perspective, we should be doing everything we can to try and influence the decision of the bus operators in the future on that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Next we have, yes, sorry, Councillor Keith Holland, LMA. Keith, over to you.
I echo the comments of Jonathan Harris, who also sits on the bus strategy with me. I mean, this report talks about the consultation with bus operators. We're in the next near future, we're about to lose our second biggest bus operator within the Northampton area as they pull out, and in all likelihood that the dominant bus operator will be taking over the routes of that operator, which basically means we're in a situation where we are utterly dependent almost entirely on one operator. When we look at all the differences between the different strategies, I recognise why it's been extended for a further year to tie in with all the other strategies that we're looking at, including the local transport plan. But we've got a situation where we've got a deteriorating service in areas and an unhealthy dependence on the whims of one operator. The differences in affordability between the dominant operator in our area and one of the operators about to move out will create real affordability problems for a number of people in my patch who are dependent on affordable options to get their children to school. And we've then got where one strategy and the delays in one strategy has an impact on another strategy in the affordability, the anti-poverty strategy. I mean, I heard on the radio, I think it was yesterday, about the increasing cost of insurance. And of course, the barrier that creates for young people, especially in rural areas, being able to learn to drive and to take themselves from A to B in areas where there are virtually no bus services. So there's a concern that I have that we're having to chase the wind here, that actually the options that we're going to have going forward are going to be extremely limited, and that we are going to be on the hook really in terms of one operator only being able to deliver the services in our area because there are no other service providers. And that creates an affordability problem for us in sustaining our network in the future. And I just urge caution and recognition that in this forward planning, we need to see that an utter dependence on one private operator where the public sector is completely gone, or even social or even businesses where there was an element of social ethos that are about to leave the market. So it's just a real concern that I want to express here, because I am concerned. In terms of frequency of services in the Northampton area, we've got problems, which creates a deterrent to people relying on those services, which then further diminishes the number of users for that service. And that is a real problem and real concern. And I am really urge that in all the considerations that we do make sure that our conversations are broader than just the one operator. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Keith. Final speaker, Councillor Purser. Bob.
Thank you, Chair. I have the problem of coming last this evening because I agree with the points that Jonathan and Keith have made. But we do have a duty to those who use our bus services, who are older people, families with young children, and people who are often quite socially isolated. And when we were looking at this in the Transport Strategy Group, it was an issue that linked rural areas with our urban areas, that we have isolated people who are dependent on buses, and those individuals become more isolated as the bus service reduces. And this is a kind of equalities issue for us as a community. I suppose as I've gone around and looked at other towns, they seem to have more buses and greener buses. Why have we allowed our services to deteriorate over time? And I'm also concerned that the funding model we've got is just a 1-year propping up of but we need a longer term strategy so that we can plan our bus services better. So I think the consultants' report behind the policy raises some really worrying questions. And I think we have to give this attention and urgency in the coming year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you all our speakers for your points on that. Stuart, as I'm the poor substitute, would you mind answering some of the questions or making any observations? Thank you.
Happy to, Chair. Thank you. And again, I'd like to thank all of the speakers, and most of which are part of the strategy working group. And again, thanks for all the hard work that's gone into the assistance into bringing this forward. In relation to looking at the West Hunsbury, East Hunsbury, et cetera, and it goes across the whole of the area. We will be looking at all of those services as we go forward. We'll be certainly doing lots more consultation as we take it from this interim strategy into what we hope is a more consolidated approach to delivering a new way of working within West Northants as we move forward. So again, please be assured that there will be a lot more consultation following this. This is a 1-year interim strategy, as has already been identified. A lot more work it needs to be done in moving this forward. And I think that picks up on most of the points that were put forward. It's the work that we've already identified, the work that we're already starting to commission, the work that we're already starting to look at and bring forward. What is clear is what we've got at the moment doesn't work. It doesn't work for our rural communities. We need to look at a different, more sustainable model that doesn't rely on the funding regimes that we're currently faced with. But let's face it, the biggest issue is that we just don't have the people using buses that we used to have. And that's one of the major problems. We've got the commercial issues that has been referenced. That is another big problem. So therefore, the default to community transport seems a logical one, to creating a network of community transport, looking at all of our funding, not just that from central government, but all of the funding that goes into many of the contracts that we've got. And again, how do we make more and play more of that? So again, I can't disagree with hardly any of the points. It's points that we've talked about within the working group that we have looked at and will put forward into the next strategy, if you like. But it's important that we have this interim strategy. And I think that's nobody's really identified any problem with the strategy that's in front of us. It's just making the points of what the challenge is looking ahead. And I think we note all of those points. We will continue with the strategy working group as we go forward. And I look forward to working with the members cross-party in making sure we've got the best possible services that we can, looking at the different model I hope we can actually implement as we go forward. So rather than look at the individual issues, I would just say, thank you, noted. We'll work together in making sure that we produce something that we can hopefully moves all of those issues forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stuart. It's very helpful. I struggle to disagree with any of the points made by our speakers, really. I think we're largely all on the same page with this and the challenges that have been pointed out, really. Adam, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, just to say, Mr. Chairman, how helpful the contribution from Daniel Sohn was in highlighting the importance of bus services to suburban areas, when so often we see this issue through the prism of the needs of rural areas such as my own. So that perspective and that knowledge of areas such as East and West Hunsbury is helpful. But I must say how surprised I am that the Liberal Democrats should take exception that someone turns up and speaks up for the residents of East Hunsbury and Shelfridge ward.
Thank you, Adam. Jolly good. Okay, any further points at all on this or questions that we'd like to raise? I think we're all heading in the same direction on it, aren't we? In which case, recommendations, as always, are at section 3. Can I just ask you to confirm, please, your agreement to those recommendations? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Takes us on to item 10. This is the Northampton tourism strategy. I'm going to suggest we'll get through this one and then we'll take a 5-minute break of some sort. But this particular one is with Dan, Councillor Lister. We've then got 2 speakers, which is Councillor Keith Holland-Delamere and then Councillor Bob Purser. So Dan, over to you to introduce this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This Northampton tourism strategy sets out our vision and approach to nurturing and enhancing the county's visitor economy. National statistics show we have 18 million visits in Northamptonshire with £1 billion of spend, which supports over 30,000 jobs across the county and 3,000 businesses. But we do have huge growth potential in this market. We do have some untapped gems here. The strategy has developed over 18 months and has been co-produced by West Northants and North Northants alongside partners and stakeholders from across the public, private, voluntary and community sectors, and has 4 principal goals to focus on: visits and value, great people, better business, inspirational places, and aims to improve pride in place, generate inward investment and create new employment opportunities. The report sets out our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats of the local visitor economy and clear actions to address nurturing and growing activity in the area, including the intention to develop a new private sector-led local visitor economy partnership to drive delivery in the future. The requirements of the new LVEP are to be across a large geography, of which a single local authority like West Northants would not be classed as. Given the similar identity and perception offer, it is logical to develop the strategy and the future of the LVEP as Northamptonshire. Visit England is creating a portfolio of around 40 nationally supported strategic LVEPs. These LVEPs will provide strong local leadership and governance in tourism destinations. Their mission is to support and grow the visitor economy through robust destination management, strong stakeholder relationships, and clear planning. Whilst there is currently no funding available from Visit England, if any funding or support does come, this will only be through LVEPs. Whilst WNC will continue to deliver specific activities at a local level, we would work with wider partners for larger initiatives where appropriate and necessary as set out within the strategy. Our next steps are to establish a task and finish group with partners, attractions and employers to deliver initiatives and promote Northamptonshire, and to also inform LVEP development and to explore the county-wide benefits of having an accredited LVEP, which would include expert support to drive the visitor economy and the potential of future funding only available to LVEPs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan. So our speakers, first of all, Keith Holland-Delamere, Councillor Holland-Delamere, over to you.
So, so I recognise the need for the strategy to basically access future funding. I know, of course, there's not much money in it at the moment. I think really for me, it's just to urge that there's a real need for that collaboration that's talked about. It's good to collaborate, but sometimes we talk about strategy, but our practice means that we don't always live up to it. We don't always go far enough with our conversations back and forward between the different community groups, the different places. My concern is on this one, we're not even getting the basics right in some places, like tourist information in Northampton. the number of people who go to one place to find that it's actually in another place. And sometimes people in senior positions within the civic community don't even know whether it's in one place or not. Sometimes we're not very good at communicating between each other, between our partners, what plans and strategies we've got, and actually making sure that our fine words are actually in practice on the ground. I note that there's been a decline in the number of visitors to this area. I recognise the incredible developments that are going on in Northampton to be a hub for the wider area. That actually, because we're trying to rebuild Northampton in terms of its tourist offer, its offer to the nighttime economy, its offer to culture, etc., and its wider contribution towards the area, that we have got to really work on that. I would urge also that you have an open relationship with other partners, for example, the town and parish councils, that actually you need to listen to what they're saying, you need to see what they're doing, because with the limited resources that we've got behind it, it is so important for us to work collaboratively and open with every single authority that really wants the best for West Northamptonshire, for Northamptonshire, and to really promote what we're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your comments, Keith. Bob, Councillor Purser, you're happy with what's been raised? Very good. Okay, thank you for saying that. Anything that we want to pick up there, Dan? Would you be able to sort of respond on some of
Yeah,
those
I think
points, perhaps?
certainly around that relationship with partners, I think it's important to understand what the LVEP is. So the LVEP isn't the council. The council is an independent body. The council will be on the LVEP, but it's not the LVEP, and therefore it's about how we build that collaboration of the people on there who are on the board of the LVEP, whether that's houses or churches or whatever that is. And that task and finish group is going to inform us about how we work and deliver that moving forward. Totally get tourist information. It annoys me as well. We're part of the in recruitment process for a tourism officer as well, which is going to drive that forward. I know Louise and through Jane Stewart's team are working on things like the visitor and how that fits in with the museum and our current offer and things like that. So I'm 100% with you on that one, because it's crazy that there isn't a good tourism centre in Northampton. With you 100%. So, but yeah, get the basics right. Agree with you. This isn't instead of, this is as well as, all happening together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Further comments, Adam? You're going to come in there?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Having been involved in the very, very early stages of the LVEP process before we had a slight reshuffling of responsibilities, it's a pleasure to see the strategy before us this evening. We all know what a wonderful place Northamptonshire is to visit, and therefore, having that strategic approach, bringing together partners is essential in sharing that knowledge and promoting the attractions that we have. I particularly liked the section of the report which highlighted the potential around digital marketing and tapping into how younger tourists explore the country and go to places that are less traditional than older generations would maybe consider going to. So I think there's some really innovative, fresh thinking in here, which bodes very well for promoting and increasing Northamptonshire as a tourist destination. So I welcome the report.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. Any further comments at all? Questions or comments anybody would like to make? No, in which case the recommendations are at section 3. Can I just ask you to confirm your agreement? Is it agreed? Thank you very much. I'm just going to suggest a quick break. We've nearly been going a couple of hours. Spent a lot of time quite rightly on the Ridgeway report. That was absolutely the right thing to do. It's about 5:02 now. Shall we aim to be back and started by 10 past? Is that okay? Get back a little before 10 past. Make Everybody, on to item 11. This is commissioning a unified digital network for West Northants Council. In a moment, Mike will introduce it, after which we have two speakers, councillors Beardsworth and Purser. So Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. This is a nice, simple one, really. Of all of these changes that we're doing within DTI, there's an optimum time to do it, and this is the optimum time to do this one. We obviously had 4 legacy networks with the 4 councils, which sounds like already we're cobbling something together. But if you put on top of that the impact of COVID, where none of those networks, none of those councils were set up for agile working and home working and things like that. And I think we'll all remember the big rush to get set up on Zoom and things like that back in March 2020. So this brings this all together and will give us a stable and secure position moving forward. We have had separate papers on security and the security around the network and how we've spent some money on that. If people are going to question me on that, I'd rather take those in private, because I don't want to disclose all of the secrets to how we secure our network in a public forum. And obviously, when we did have that report on that, we took that on papers and private. Happy to present it and take the public speakers lead it.
Thank you, Mike. So let's hand over to the speakers. So first of all, Councillor Beardsworth. Sally, over to you.
Good evening. Right. I was going to ask just a couple of questions maybe that Councillor Hallam could answer for me. We did a scrutiny report on IT, and we said that it would have to have a lot more finances aimed at it to bring it up to the standard we need it today to cover all the councils that are amalgamated through the unitary. And obviously this is part of it. I just wanted to know if the budget has been cut for the running of the IT department by $500,000, if that is going to be detrimental. It probably will be detrimental to this, but in the future. And also, will there be other redundancies rather than just the voluntary redundancies that they're talking about?
Yeah, happy to answer that. Completely different, really. I think you've used that as an excuse to get onto the topic of the VR programme. So it's not really what's in the report. That won't be affected, as you've already outlined. The VR programme is actually designed, and I'll give you a really good example. 20 years ago, we used to have rooms full of people that would repair PCs. Maybe if your PC was running a bit slower, they'd put some extra memory in it and make it run a bit faster. You don't need that now. For example, that function, because all of those tasks are run online, they run in the cloud rather than on your local PC. For example, your Word is run on Office 365 rather than a local PC. Plus, on top of that, in terms of that example, if one of these things, if your thing of this thing breaks, do you take it to someone and they unscrew it and they change some things in it? No, they don't. And that's and effectively it's under a manufacturer's warranty. Something like an iPhone is going to be sent directly back to the manufacturer. And that's the way of the world with an awful lot of PCs these days, as well as tablet devices. So the restructure is around a restructure of the service need that we need. So actually we need far less people perhaps than we had with screwdrivers physically mending things, and we need far more that are skilled in cloud technologies like Azure, like GCP, like AWS, and none of those technologies were around 20 years ago. So the restructure is around a restructure of technical need.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Sally. And so next, Councillor Purser. Bob, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we have to welcome this. I'm really a bit surprised that we're now 2.5 years into this authority and are only now getting one single system. I'd have thought we might have had this a bit earlier, but it's welcome nonetheless that we're actually got it now. I know some local authorities have got into big problems with over-ambitious IT systems, and we do seem to be doing incrementally, and that's probably a wise approach to take. Scrutiny, we're really suggesting we should be actually doubling our investment in IT. I hope this is part of that, and I hope that we'll continue. We have to go down the IT route. We have to invest be at the forefront of investing in our IT. And I'm hoping this is all part of a joined up strategy. And it links to the start, as we've talked about, as Sally's question was about the link between our kind of investment strategy and our staffing strategy, that the two of those are linked up. So that's really the point I would want to raise.
Yeah, the two answers really relate back to that, really, because it's absolutely fundamentally linked up to the staffing strategy and the need to skill up with separate skills. A lot of this will see a move to a cloud first strategy, which we currently don't have. We have a number of literally what in the IT world is called TIN. So we have TIN that supports the back end servers that support that. And there's lots amongst all of the different previous authorities. Some of those are on no support agreements or very limited support agreements, and some of those are on fixed term agreements. So bringing this at this time where I talk about the optimum time to change, it's because this is the optimum time to change when you consider all those contract end dates.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mike. Any further queries on this? Anything for the cabinet? Questions or comments? No? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mike. Recommendations here at section 3, of course. Can I ask you to confirm your agreement to the recommendations? Agreed? Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Takes us on to item 12. This is with Fiona, admissions arrangements for community and voluntary controlled West Northamptonshire schools for the 25 intake and coordinated schemes for 25 intakes. Okay, so Fiona will introduce this, following which we have one speaker, Councillor Purser. Fiona, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. The school admission arrangements must be set annually. It's a statutory duty. As a council, we have this duty to adhere to before the 28th of February each year. The document lays out very clearly the schools and the pupil admission numbers, also all the information needed to apply for a school, and also the appeals information, and listed very clearly are the numbers of pupils that each school will take into their school. Each year, local authorities must publish on their website a scheme to coordinate admissions to the publicly funded schools within their area. Applications must be processed in accordance with the timetables set out in these schemes. Appendix A is for arrangements for community and voluntary controlled schools in West Northamptonshire, 2025 intakes. Appendix B, WNC primary coordinated scheme for 2025 intake. And Appendix C is for the secondary schools in our area. There are no changes to these arrangements for this year from last year, so there's been no need for a consultation, and the Cabinet are asked to recommend this as it is a statutory requirement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bob?
Thank you, Chair. And I realise how stretched our school teams are, and that rolling over the policy is an expedient thing to do, but I think there are issues here. I was out on the streets of East Hunsbury last weekend, and the issue of school admissions was raised on the doorstep, and people unhappy about the application process and the appeals process, feeling that there are some people feel that that our equalities approach is not good here, that schools can appear to be discriminating, that there are primary schools very close to secondary schools that never get a child into that secondary school. So there are concerns around that that it's not working fairly, and that bothers me. I don't know what the answer to that is, because schools are responsible for their own admissions processes, but on the street, parents are concerned about how it works at the moment. I just raise that as an issue.
Thank you, Bob. Fiona, did you want to comment at all or make any last remarks?
Yes, these laid out requirements here are for the schools who are under the West Northamptonshire Council guidance. We have got some academy schools in our area that do their own admission scheme, and we have no control over the children that they have in their school. Unfortunately, that has been part of the academy service, but this is certainly a well tried and tested admission service that runs for Northamptonshire, West Northants Council schools.
Thank you. Adam, you got a comment?
Yeah, councillor Purser's comments there concern me, actually. I think if there's any indication that a single school is not complying to the letter with the Equality Act, then that's an issue that needs to be reported and investigated as soon as possible. So I'd strongly urge him to bring the name of that school to the attention of the education team at WNC so that that issue can be fully investigated. Every child deserves equal access to education regardless of their background, and we need to look into any sort of issue if that appears to not be the case.
Thank you, Adam. Any further comments at all? No, okay. As always, the recommendations are at section 3. It's been pointed out to me that we tend to reach consensus on discussions and that probably we should signal more clearly with our voting. So I can ask you to raise a hand as well. Can I ask you to confirm your agreement, please, to the recommendations? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. That's good. That takes us on to item 13. And this is the disposal of the former Collingtree small holding watering lane. In Malcolm Longley's absence, I'll just make a short introduction on this, and then we have two speakers. Yeah, two speakers are, first of all, Councillor Jonathan Harris, and then Councillor Bob Purser, who's also got some comments to incorporate from Councillor Randall, I believe. So this site is allocated for housing, has been for some time in the land plan, the local plan. So important that we deliver to ensure that people have homes and of course to respect our planning policies, having allocated it some time ago for housing. So the site could have just been sold bare, if you like, to let the market decide what happens with it. We know that happens in a lot of circumstances. However, that we felt would prevent the council making the most of the opportunity to pursue its own aims of bringing forward homes and so on. Therefore, the proposed disposal method includes a number of things. First of all, a requirement to deliver policy compliant affordable housing for the council. This will increase our own housing stock, helping us to accommodate more people in housing need and reducing pressures on things like temporary accommodation. Also, a sustainable heat network and smart electricity grid. Modern features which support our target of a net zero West Northamptonshire by 2045. We'll also bring forward 10 plots for self-build housing and a site for a private sector care home, supporting delivery of the diverse mix of housing accommodation for West Northants residents. This approach should deliver the best possible value for money as well for our residents. So those are the comments there. We'll bring our two speakers in. First, Councillor Harris. Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. There's actually many things to welcome on this proposal, lots of good things that I see within it. I just wanted to a couple of specific clarifications on a few things and a broader few comments, if I may. The first relates to item 2.4, which talks about the self-build plots. And I guess what I'm trying to understand is it talks about the fact that we obviously have a statutory duty to bring these forward. And I wanted to try and understand where we are in regards to that as a council. So whether we're behind, ahead, or what the issue is in terms of the number that we should be providing. The reason I ask it specifically is because obviously one of the positive things about this potential development is the social housing side of things. And I guess my question fundamentally is if they weren't in the mix, I guess it's part of the viability issue. But if they weren't in the mix, how many more social or modular homes could there potentially be? So fundamentally, it's about whether or not we could scale the social housing aspect without the need for those being there in the first place. My next point refers to 28B, the heat network smart grid. Again, you won't be surprised to hear me say that I think that's a fantastic idea. But obviously, it's very conditionally worded in here. And I guess what I would ask is that we try and think about how we might take this as an opportunity to be an exemplar site for this, to demonstrate the feasibility of this type of system. And the comment I would make on there, obviously with the UK 100 network, there are almost certainly examples of where this is actually being put in place or utilised. So we should try and make those connections. So if people want wiring up with that, whoever's driving it, then please let me know, because I'm pretty sure I can remember of some examples already. And my final point relates to the private sector care home. It links back to some of our conversations from earlier this evening. I guess private sector, because again, it adds to the viability of the site as a whole. But I guess again, it's that question around why private and why not the opportunity for us to do something. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to pick up on a couple of those things, I think this represents the best opportunity to have that mix of tenures suitable for the location and so on. And clearly we could develop more densely social housing. I think what I'm not sure about, and I don't know if either Simon or Stuart can answer, is in terms of our requirements on self-build and so on. Jonathan asking whether we're ahead. Is it possible to answer that at all? Or throw any light on that?
Jonathan, sorry, Leader. We are not doing too badly at the moment, but there is always if you like, a risk, if you look at it negatively, that the list will increase in size, because anyone can apply to be on the list for a pretty nominal sum. I think it's £5 a year or something. And if at any point we have a situation where the list has more names on it, more requirements than our ability to deliver planning consents, we have what is something of an untested situation, but we have a statutory duty to grant enough planning consents for the people on the list. It's not clear in the legislation what happens if we don't have enough people asking for planning permission, but what this proposal allows us to do is proactively engage with that, buffer against that risk, and help manage it, as well as positively to give people choices about the way that they accommodate themselves, and also to deliver a good land value, because self-built plots tend to be valuable. So it'll be a good learning experience for the council. We'll see how it goes. If in an extreme case nobody wants them, well, that's fine. They're easily reusable for other forms of housing. If they are taken up and they deliver good value, then it may be something the council wants to do more of in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. So you've got a great deal to learn from this, isn't there? Yes, fantastic. Accepting the caveat there on heat network and smart grid and so on, accepted. Naturally, that could mean that in viability terms, those then disappear. We hope not. They're in there as an expression of commitment to hope to deliver them, and share your eagerness that they do, Jonathan. In terms of the care home, there's a question there about need and viability. Does anybody want to comment on that in the light of the earlier discussion? Simon, thank you. It looks like you might comment.
Thank you, Leader. The reason the care home proposal is in there, as Councillor Harris picked up, I think, is that it will deliver, our consultants tell us, good land value. It makes sense. There is a relatively low parking demand. You get a lot of accommodation on the area of land concerned, and there is apparently a market demand. So for all those reasons, it makes sense, because actually delivering good financial value out of the site helps the council in all kinds of ways. Nothing wrong with that. It also, of course, provides another option for people. In terms of why not a public sector home, essentially for the same reasons that Stuart Lackenby outlined earlier, that the finances just don't work for it. I mean, Stuart may want to elaborate on that, but that was basically the background to that.
Thank you, Simon. That probably covers it. Don't think there's anything further to add, Stuart, on that, is there? No, thank you very much. We have a further speaker, of course, Councillor Purser. Bob, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, I was going to raise the two questions about the self-build plots and are they, how much of a priority are they, and the sadness that we can't have a public sector care home or a care home within a complex, a mixed complex. I think this is one of our major development opportunities as a local authority, and I very welcome that it's on the agenda tonight. And thank Simon Bowers for briefing me on this last week and for putting time aside, because I had some detailed questions. Got a couple of points. One is, are we really sure that the air quality issues around Junction 15 have been resolved to the point where it's not going to be to the detriment of residents on that site? I know there have been significant junction improvements and carriageway works, but we really need to make sure that we're not putting our residents at risk there. The second question, which is particularly something I feel strongly about, is about noise pollution. I lived in Abington Vale, and the A45 drove me mad. And so there is something about how can we mitigate the noise of traffic on this particular site. Welcome the level of social housing proposed. I understand it will be at the sort of the maximum level we can manage. So 35% is the figure I would hope for. I think we should do a viability test to see what would happen if it was 50%. Could we drive it up to 50%? On this site, is that possible? And for us to look at the economic case for that. Also welcome the idea of testing the viability of a district heating system. That would be wonderful if we could have one of those in Northampton. Modern scheme, real opportunity for us. So this is a great opportunity for us. I would hope that we could work together across the parties, making sure we all make the best of this site, and we really work to make this work for us as a town, make it work for West Northamptonshire. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. I know a lot of work was done with the previous sort of improvements to the motorway, low noise surfacing and that kind of thing. So I think there is some improvement, which is known as an area of air quality difficulty for sure. Some mitigation went in again for that at the last roadworks. Did you want to add any comment on that, Stuart, or do you think I've said all we can?
Well, just very quickly to say, well, as Bob knows, those are all issues that planning will deal with, but obviously within the local plan allocation, those are issues that would have been picked up at that particular time. So we do have some assurance, but that will be tested through the planning process as well.
Thank you. Adam, you're going to comment?
Thank you, Chairman. As you'd expect, I really welcome this report, and especially the ambition to deliver social housing on the site. I think this is a very obvious benefit of being in a unitary council. This is previously NCC land, and I dare say that if we were still in the two-tier system, this land would be being sold off to the highest bidder to prop up the finances of the county council. As things are, we're able to look at the land more strategically and put it to best use for the benefit of residents in a more wholesome sense. I think actually this paper goes some way to refuting the accusation that we heard earlier that we simply look to sell our council assets to the highest bidder. This clearly isn't the case in this proposal. We are looking at this strategically, and certainly Stuart and Simon and others deserve a lot of credit for the approach that they're taking on that front. I do think it's absolutely vital that we deliver on the ambition set out in the report, but I completely agree with Councillor Purser on his suggestion that when we undertake viability assessments to see if we can go even further on the delivery of social or affordable housing when we go to put the site out to market. This is a pretty we don't have many of these opportunities, do we, to precisely define the use of the land that we own. So defining the use and putting in place stretch targets for anyone coming along and developing the site is so important. But yes, Chairman, I fully welcome this and look forward to seeing the progress made. And just one more point to add, I think that this following hot on the heels of the St James bus depot acquisition just goes to underline the level of ambition and the absolute commitment that we as an authority have to delivering social and affordable housing, and that commitment won't stop.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam, and you're absolutely right. Yes. Do we have any further comments, questions on this? No? Okay, in which case, if I can ask you to signal, please, your agreements to the recommendations. Is that agreed? Okay, that's everybody again. Thank you very much indeed. This takes us on to item 14. This is office optimization, phase 2, and costs and proposals. I have some comments to this report. Is Councillor Malcolm Longley's. I'll present it, say a few words at the start in his absence, following which we have 6 speakers. Okay, so following its West ways of working review, the council has established it had far too much office space to meet its needs. This frankly is an unjustified cost for local residents to bear. And at a time when all councils are experiencing budget pressures through inflation and increasing demand for vital services. we take very seriously the obligation upon us to maximise the effectiveness of our property use and to reduce our property costs. First action we took to address this, the new locality hub in Daventry, replacing the old Lodge Road, is now complete. We expect to agree the disposal or letting of the Lodge Road offices certainly by the end of this year, and costs have already been significantly reduced, including with ongoing rent from the DWP covering building costs there. We're now addressing Northampton and Towcester. This report brings forward a significant number of proposals and recommendations to meet the serious obligation of effective use of property and reducing property costs. In Northampton, we have two sets of offices. Obviously in the modern part, or the 1992 Guildhall extension, and then also in Angel Square. But frankly, we only need one. We carefully analysed if we could use the Guildhall only, the modern office accommodation there, and perhaps sublet One Angel Square. However, that option turned out to be too expensive, and it had a certain number of significant risks, as we could potentially have been left with the cost of both buildings and the conversion works for a long time. So therefore, what we're going to do is focus our office accommodation in One Angel Square, with the historic Guildhall remaining, of course, and being our civic, and if you like, democratic base. We'll make arrangements to continue to provide alternative space for Northampton Town Council if it wants to. However, one amendment to the report, and this is at paragraph 5.8C, and this is a revised intention that didn't come through in the initial report, and we've reflected further. Successfully voting on this report would mean a revised intention for the Mayor's Parlour and the adjoining reception room to remain available for the Mayor, Town Council Mayor's use. So we will market the 1992 Guildhall extension for suitable uses. And a separate report will be coming forward on the future use of the County Hall site, and that will be coming forward within the next month, 2 at most. In Towcester, we will, subject to consultation, create our first family hub, combining the Children's Centre with a wider range of services to support families at all stages of their children's lives. This will help people live better lives and also save us money through early intervention when children's and families' problems are less acute and can be managed more easily. The forum here will also remain the home of WNC's planning service and, of course, the library and some other services. We've also extended an offer to Towcester Town Council to relocate its community centre to this building. We recognise the decision is for the Town Council to take, and if it does not want to use the space, we'll find suitable alternative uses for it. Overall, these proposals will allow us to shape our building stock to meet the needs of the people of West Northamptonshire, including helping ensure that WNC itself operates effectively and efficiently. Okay, let's move to our speakers, of which we have 6. The first one, we welcome Councillor Jane Birch from the Town Council. Councillor Hibbert couldn't be with us here this evening, his duties as Mayor of Northampton. So he has also asked, and we have accepted, that Councillor Birch also make a few comments on behalf of Councillor Hibbert. So welcome, Jane, over to you.
Right, good evening, everyone. I am speaking on behalf of Councillor Stephen Hibbert to begin. So these are his words. I address you as the non-political Mayor of Northampton. Apologies for not being with you, but I'm elsewhere on mayoral duty, and I'm grateful to Councillor Birch for her help in expressing my views to you. Whilst I appreciate the amendment to maintain the Mayor's corridor, I find the proposal to evict the Town Council from the Guildhall petty and unnecessary. They occupy 7 rooms on a single ground floor corridor. WNC have no need of it for meetings. They barely use the meeting rooms on the 1st floor. The coroner can be housed elsewhere. If you think County Hall is suitable for the Town Council, then it's certainly suitable for the coroner. It includes a chamber and a courtroom, and either would be appropriate for inquests. It is a county service anyway, so should be housed anywhere in the county. The coroner can find a chair to her liking. She clearly finds mine uncomfortable. If you think County Hall is suitable, or can be made suitable for the town council or the coroner, then it can be made suitable for WNC. You plan to spend money on it, spend it to your use. The mayoralty is recorded at more than 800 years, but goes back even further, and its office has operated out of the Guildhall for 160 years. That office lies within the authority of Northampton Town Council, and you should not create a disconnect. Reject the proposal and grant a lease of the 2 ground floor corridors to Northampton Town Council. And that is Councillor Stephen Hibbert's contribution to this evening. Right, I should now add my own. The Mayor, Councillor Stephen Hibbert, has made a strong case for Northampton Town Council to retain the administrative centre for the town in the historic Guildhall. The Borough of Northampton came into fruition in 1189, and the first Mayor of Northampton was William Tilley in 1215. The current Guildhall building was opened in 1864 after the Corporation of Councillors sold corporation property and imposed a penny rate on the residents of the town to pay for the Guildhall. It was stated at the time that the new building was constructed to allow the public business of the town to be conducted in a proper manner, and it would provide accommodation for carrying out the civic and business of the borough. The Guildhall was paid for by the residents of Northampton and has been used since 1864 for the administration of the town's affairs. On the 18th of January 2021, Northampton Borough Council recommended that the Guildhall, the Town Hall, be the headquarters of Northampton Town Council. On the 22nd of March 2021, in full council, Northampton Borough Council, the sovereign council at the time, resolved that the old part of the Guildhall, the Town Hall, is the recommended headquarters for Northampton Town Council on a long leasehold on an internal repairing basis. WNC full council in July 2021, proposed by Councillor Eales, seconded by Councillor Brown, adopted an exercise to capture all approved motions within the 4 previous authorities to ensure any democratic decisions are retained and flow through into the present day thinking of WNC. This will also reaffirm the importance of local democratic decision-making. Why is WNC now reneging on these decisions? Northampton Town Council is the largest by population in the country. At 130,000 residents, it is larger than the rest of West Northants put together. It is also the county town of Northamptonshire. It is proposed to evict the town council from its traditional centre of administration, to retain the mayor's parlour and to install political offices and the coroner's offices in the historic Guildhall offices. This goes against all previous democratic decisions. How can the mayor and the civic life of the town be managed in isolation from the staff who deliver the mayor's civic programme of events? How can the coroner's office, dealing with sensitive and confidential court documents, work alongside busy political offices, visitors to the mayor's parlour, and town council staff attending civic business? This is an orchestrated attempt to break up the functions and fragment the operation of the town council. The decision for this proposal will be made by cabinet members, with only Councillor Hallam elected to represent the interests of part of those 130,000 residents of Northampton. Remaining cabinet members represent residents in Middleton, Cheney, Budbrook, Braunston, Crick, Woodford and Weedon. We are talking about, if we were talking about Brackley Town Council, I suspect the proposal would be very different. My question is, why are you doing this? It makes no economic or logical sense. We are a leaseholder at the moment, and we pay our rent to you. We pay over £80,000 a year to WNC. Why do you want to get rid of us? And how are you going to explain this to the residents of Northampton who look on the Guildhall as their town hall? And I can assure you that the citizens of Northampton will give you their answer in May 2025. Thank you. And I'm sorry to disturb the very sort of collaborative tone of this evening, but you can, I hope, appreciate how strongly I personally feel about this and how strongly the residents of Northampton feel about this. We are being done to, not being worked with. And I think we have tried in the last 2.5 years to work in partnership in where we can. And this has not produced that understanding of where the town council sits, what it means historically, symbolically, socially, culturally, and where the communities lie, and their feelings and their passion for the town. And the way that the town will be rebuilt is to harness and work with those people and those communities and encourage them to once again return to the town and be proud of it. That's what we're working for. And this sort of attitude that you can run roughshod over a town council that's been in position for hundreds of years is not going to help that bringing together of our communities, our businesses, our institutions, our historical roots. So think very carefully about this. It's very damaging to the town, it's very damaging to the communities, and damaging to the majority of the people who you are representing as West Northants councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. I do understand your strength of feeling, Jay, really do. I mean, statistically, it's slightly under a third. That's not the main thrust of the point, but it is just less than a third, isn't it, than of our 425,000 residents. Perhaps we'll come back to any points and we'll ask others to chip in. Let's take our next speaker is Councillor Beersworth. Sally, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And can I also add my support to the Mayor's statement and to Councillor Jane Birch's statement. I find it absolutely incredible that we're even here discussing this. I've always said the Guildhall belongs to the people of Northampton. It's their heritage. And the town council should be in that building because they're the town council. It just makes sense. You know, the coroner's office used to be in County Hall. They used to have their courts there. And that's when I was in the county council. So why can't they go back there? There's always a facility for them there. The town council needs to stay where it is. What we've got to learn is to work collaboratively across councils, irrespective of their being a Labour council. There are people on there that are conservative, there are people on there that are liberal. We need to work together to make the best for our town. If we don't work together, what's the people going to think that every time there's a change of council, there's going to be a change of everything? We have to have a plan, a strategy that goes forward, not 5, but 10, but 20 years, that we can all agree on and get things done together. When we first mooted the fact of having parish councils, I thought it would be a step forward to taking the message down to the people. But it isn't, because you're not listening to the people. You're not listening to the people that you need to listen to, is the general public. And the very fact you're kicking, which is extensively what you're doing, kicking the town council out of what they should be their home, is a totally wrong move. Please, please reconsider. I think this is going to be so damaging for you primarily, but for the town council as well. And we've got to learn to work together. We've got to learn to actually put sometimes our political differences aside and try and do the best for the town we represent and the county we represent. And, you know, they pay their rent on time. that, you know, I went in the other day to the Guildhall. The members' room is full of furniture. It can't even be used. That's 2 rooms up there that are full of storage. You know, surely somebody needs to be looking into the rooms that we can use there. You've got 3 committee rooms, well, 2 if you get rid of the Jeffrey room, which is the best committee room that we have, and you're selling that off. You know, I do really worry about where these recommendations are coming from, because they're not coming with the thought of the people of the town or the town council, who are doing a sterling job. I think you can't deny that. And I think we need to support our parishes and our town councils, not to kick them out of their home. So please, please listen to the pleas of the mayor and the leader of the council which is the parish council, but it's a town council. Listen to their plea and please, please allow this not to happen, because I think it would be very, very damaging for you as a cabinet and as a council, that you can't work together with a town council that's been elected by the people of Northampton. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sally. And next we have Councillor Meredith. Dennis, welcome.
Thank you, Leader, for giving me the chance of speaking. I'm here tonight as a town councillor for Northampton. I'm also a councillor for West Northampton, so I've got 2 interests here. First, I'd like to say that the residents saying how well the town council of Northampton is doing. And it would be a terrible thing to make the town council to leave the office that now people know in the town is that the town council is in the Guildhall. The town council has 9 members of staff. It's quite a big amount of staff for a town council. One of the, as it said previously, biggest in Northampton. Biggest in the country, rather. I also think that the cost of £8,000, which the town council pays rent, they shouldn't be charged that money. That should be free. That should be free, so that can actually be spent for the good of the residents and not paid back to West Northampton Council. Northampton Town Council has improved the town centre. They have their bloom, which is, you might have seen if you've been in Northampton, is a variety of flowers that around the town. And also that is expanded out into the area that I represent over the Talavera. All the lampposts there have lovely flowers put on in hanging baskets, and it looks quite attractive. And the residents have said how nice that is. But I have to say, with all sincerity, 18 years as a councillor, I've never seen my area look so bad, and it is really bad. As the last mayor of Northampton, I was so pleased with the town council, with the way they conducted and the way they supported and they helped me as mayor. It was wonderful to see the different organisations that I went to visit, and people mentioned how well it was, and it was also linked to the offices of the town council. The mayor's has an entrance into the mayor's parlour, which is a way into there. I was the first mayor, and if I'm wrong on this, I would apologise, but I was the first mayor to actually open up the mayor's parlour to the general public. I had so many different groups, and I used to invite the different groups, spread right through for tea and biscuits and cakes, and it was a marvellous thing. And then I used to do tours and show them where the offices of the town council was, and that went down really well. Unfortunately, the Guildhall has been a no-go area for members of the public. It's actually like Fort Knox when you try to get in there. You have to, you really have a good excuse to get in to have a look around. I was actually, when I was mayor, was told off for taking people round, which was a really shame. So what I'm going to say to you really is I'm going to appeal to you, change your mind on this, because really it's not a good thing to for the council to evict the council. I mean, how's that going to look in the press? West Northampton Council has evicted the council, the town council from Northampton. How's that going to look for all the residents, for all, be it Conservative, Labour, Lib Dems? It's going to look terrible in the press. And that's what's going to happen, because the press are going to have a field day over this. So I'll stop there, because I've told you enough. As the former mayor, I'm saying to you, forget it, think again. Councillor Bearsworth has actually come up with a wonderful suggestion. The members' room, I went in and had a look about 6 months ago, and she is right what she says. It's full of things, and there is the room at the back, so you could use them rooms. There's plenty of rooms for you to come to there. So please approach myself and the town council, Councillor Birch, and we will give and even Councillor Mike Hallam will give you every support and every help to find you alternative accommodation. Thank you, Jonathan, for giving me the time to speak.
Sorry, Mike.
Leader, just a point, because I've been pointed to there. I'm absolutely fully confident that the officers involved, and maybe the officer involved is obviously in the room, can clarify, has done a full analysis of all of the rooms in that building, including the rooms that you mentioned. I wonder if Simon might clarify that they were included in the analysis.
Thanks, Mike. Are you happy to, Simon? Thank you.
Leader, certainly, of course, we know our buildings inside out. We plan them, we use architects to work out what the space requirements are and how you meet them. So yes, we are very much aware of all the spaces concerned. Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dennis.
Jonathan, just very quickly, if you just indulge me, just give you one example. It took me 18 months to get the boards in the Guildhall updated for the aldermans and the freemans of the fair. And it's since the last, the funeral of the king, when the new king was put in place, I still haven't had the assurance that a plaque is going to be put up in the Guildhall recognising the king's, what do they call it?
Coronation?
Proclamation.
Okay.
The proclamation. So that just shows you what will happen to the Guildhall if the West Northampton takes over that building.
Okay, actually, I think, do you want to come in that now, Adam? I know you want to comment on it. Thank you.
Yeah, quite aside from the fact that it won't be West Northampton taking over the building, because we already own the building, via the civic group at West Northamptonshire Council, we are working on the installation of the plaque. We have to go through all of the heritage aspects of this and make sure that officers are happy and that we're respecting the very valuable listed status of the Guildhall. So it will happen. I can promise you that, Dennis.
I may have to put my bed in there like I did at the county hall when they was going to sell that off. So if you're going to move in, I might move in also with my dog. So that would be quite bad for you all. So yeah. I might do that.
We look forward to that, Dennis. We've given you about 10 minutes now. We must move on, but Mike wants to make a
I just want to clear up another point. You said about the boards with the freedom of the borough and the alderman. I walked past that board the other day and I was so pleased to see it had been updated. We gave the freedom of the borough to a wonderful lady and a wonderful gentleman by the names of Chantel Cameron and Courtney Laws. And when last time I walked past, I checked to see that those names were updated. We did that before Christmas, and that all of the names are up to date. So that one can be crossed off your list too.
Brilliant, brilliant. Let's bring our next speaker, which is Keith, Councillor Holland-Delamere. Over to you, Keith. I try not to appear to stifle anything here, so we're letting get an average of 6-7 minutes per speaker. So without being unkind, if you can be concise, you always are, of course, Keith. Thank you. Over to you.
What crumbs? you really haven't thought this through. Moving the one-stop shop from the centre of the town to the bottom of a hill. Have you done the equalities impact assessment? I mean, are we going to offer a free taxi service for pensioners to get from the one-stop shop at One Angel Square? I just can't believe you've done this to the town of Northampton. 800 years of history. I'm a proud first generation Northamptonian. South Northampton had the decency to look forward, to work with their town councils in Brackley and Toaster to make sure that the assets were held but in trust for the people of those places. 800 years of history, the third eldest mayoralty in the whole entire country. There's already a feeling in Northampton that things have been done to us, and you are just reinforcing that view to the people of Northampton, that our civic pride, our status is being taken away from us. It's unbelievable. I am livid of what you are doing to the people of Northampton. It's unbelievable. And I really do think you need to listen. Listen to Northampton's voice. Do not impose this lack of forward planning and foresight to our town.
Thank you. Oh, you're going to come in there, Adam? It's called.
Yeah, just want to say nothing's being taken away here. The mayoralty will still have its spiritual home at the Guildhall, but the 3-year-old town council will be found alternative accommodation. That's all that's happening here. And let's not forget that West Northamptonshire Council also represents Northampton, and the people of Kingsthorpe, the people of Billing, the people of East and West Hunsrey, the people of Farcroton and Delaphrey have also invested in the Guildhall for decades on end. They have their stake in the Guildhall, and they're only represented on West Northamptonshire Council as a collective. So I think actually there is full respect for the history and the collective historical gift that the Guildhall represents by it being cared for as a civic centre by West Northamptonshire Council. The town council only represents a small portion of the former borough council, and it is that former borough council that rightly had its home at the Guildhall, and there will never be a change to the Guildhall being a civic centre in Northampton.
Okay, Dennis, we had 10 minutes. We try to be as fair as we can. I understand your passions. I do. Let's call our next speaker, which is Councillor Roberts. Emma.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be as quick as I can because I realise it's late for all. I want to touch firstly very quickly on 5.14 of the report, which talks about the current meteorological laboratory that's at Wootton Hall Park. I just want to touch very briefly on the trading standards buildings and the state of that area. So it's referenced here that part of the land could be used for selling off of housing. I contacted the chief executive before Christmas because I'd spent months trying to get something done. And we had a serious safety parking issue, which the chief executive got involved in. We resolved the parking issue, but the state and condition of the trading standards buildings and that area is still horrendous. One back end of it is now being used for graffiti and it's being used for antisocial behaviour right next door to Police HQ. Having said that, the road has got speed bumps on it, but it's not wide enough to be an actual road. And it's causing significant issues with speeding down there, again, to the Police HQ, all of which have been raised, all of which have gone on unanswered, and the partnership unit are unable to somehow provide the costs for dealing with that. So please indulge me to use this space to try and get something done with that area, because we talk about it here as being something that will sell off. Then when I look at the report, I would take a different tack slightly to others, but I want to echo the comments of my colleagues, Councillor Holland Delamere, with regards to the equality impact assessment and the use of the One Angel Square as the one-stop shop, because it is quite a significant distance, and for those with a disability or physical impairment will have difficulty potentially getting back up the hill once they've come down the hill. Also, if we did retain any service within the Guildhall that they had to access, you might be going backwards and forwards. So I just want to avoid that, because we've had it before with people going from the Guildhall to the one-stop shop. There's the 1992 Guildhall extension. What happens to the courtyard and all of the displays? What's the intention with that? That's obviously, it's the interlinked. It was always designed to be an interlinked entity. So you can't just stick a line down between the two, in my view. And I want to say that, unfortunately, this report to me shows another time where this local government reorganisation imposed on the people of Northampton and the rest of West Northamptonshire, because of complete mismanagement on a financial perspective at NNC, and for whatever gerrymandering approach that the Conservative government chose to take, is now having an impact on our building and assets. There's a point in the report, 7.38, and that worries me, and I don't understand it. So forgive me, but it says that we are, there's a significant risk, or sorry, a major risk that we are going to receive attention. It says that it will attract adverse attention, including from government or auditors. I mean, is that threats to our financial settlements? Or what does that look like? What major risks to not looking at this are we facing from government and auditors? And then finally, I just don't think it stacks up. It feels like the changes are going to be made, and then we've got so many risks on the costs, the IT not working, things changing, building costs changing. It just doesn't feel like it's necessary, and it feels like a fly in the wind, to be honest. We're just waving it around and hoping it'll fit.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Final speaker is Councillor Purser, Bob, who's also got some comments again on behalf of Councillor Randall. Whoa, are you okay, Bob? Well held, well held. Yeah.
I'm fine. I made a rather worse mess when I went to Leicester, I have to say, which my colleagues can recount at another time.
Okay.
I'm sure it's recorded on for posterity. Right. So this is clearly a difficult and contentious issue. I've got some comments from Wendy. Particularly, she thinks if we handle this in the way that we've handled the Daventry office thing, then it's going to be a bit of a fiasco. And people in Daventry are not that happy about the way that has gone on. So she's really wanting us to be very clear about what are the outcomes we want from this. She very much supports what the town council's views are, and I won't try to replicate the passion from Jane and Keith and Dennis. I suppose the question I've got about, and I don't know that I fully understand this, but Toaster is being given access to this building rent-free, and yet our town council in Northampton is having to pay rent. I wonder if somebody could explain why that has come about. What sequence of events has led that to happen? So I suppose my thought is that this is another decision of the old county council coming up to bite us, because whoever signed off and planned Angel Square, well, I hope none of them are here with us tonight, because it's clearly not a building that meets our needs or meets local government needs. But we seem to be selling things we own in order to invest in a building we don't own. And that seems to me very perverse, really. And it seems that we've got to spend a lot of money on Angel Square to make it fit for our purpose, when we've got purpose-built rooms elsewhere. So Emma referred to the many variables and the many risks. I think this cabinet, we're going to be having a report at almost every meeting, updating us with what is a very complex situation. I'm also concerned of the impact on our staff who have to deliver services, and the impact on them having to move around while this work is done. I'm particularly concerned about, for example, democratic services who've got a by-election, a police and crime commissioner election, a general election, and a West Northamptonshire election coming up, and they've got to deliver all that while being moved around from pillar to post. So I think this is really quite a difficult position that the cabinet has got itself into. It seems to be pleasing no one, and coming up with the worst of all options. So I think you need to go back and do a lot more thought on this, Chair, if I might say so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Bob. I think there was some concern raised, and you touched on it there about the Daventry, the DWP, the occupiers. There was some concern about ongoing costs. Most of that cost has been mitigated through the DWP. They pay the utilities, for example. So lights on at night and all that sort of thing is largely down to the DWP, really. We feel free to take that up with them. One-stop shop. I've sympathy with some of the concerns that at the moment it's easier to walk flat from the bus station or from elsewhere. So we need to be really, really careful. Accessibility is a vital thing, and it's one slight concern that I have. We need to make sure that fairly steep hill at Fettered Street, I think we need major changes. The pavements are fairly new. Fettered Street is an incredibly uneven road, which will require people to cross it. So there is a lot of thought and care needed to be given to that, and will be given to that. Putting that aside, those are the main points that I wanted to make, actually. I think we might have other people who want to comment on things. Does anybody else want to comment on anything at all? Adam, you do?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think it's important that we look at the bigger picture, which is that there was a promise behind Unitary, which was a local government that had less waste, more coherent forms of delivering public services, fewer chief executives, fewer senior officers, and fewer buildings. And this is part of that strategic objective that was a promise of Unitary. It's about meeting our promise to the electorate and delivering that slimmed down, more efficient local government that the public now expect of us. And you don't make this omelette without breaking a few eggs. So this is going to be an uncomfortable process for some, but it is necessary. I think you especially, Chairman, have spent a long time considering every single aspect, and I, as a proud Northamptonian, am very sensitive to the importance of the Guildhall and other cultural assets in the county town. I think this respects those cultural assets. It respects the history. We've recognised that it's absolutely essential to keep the mayoralty in the Guildhall because of all of the historic significance that others have outlined. But ultimately, we need to keep that promise to the electorate. We need to make this a council that is sustainable for decades to come, and the savings that will emerge from optimising the offices that West Northamptonshire Council operates out of is a key part of that. So I'm behind the proposals in the paper as you've amended them.
Thank you, Adam. Mike, you're going to come in and make some comments, I think.
Thank you, Leader. I deliberately kept my powder dry on this at town council level, and anyone there will tell you that I've excused myself from every single point where this discussion cropped up. And the reason I did that so I can give an opinion here tonight where the decision will be taken. Now, tonight for me, we heard from two speakers, Councillor Purser and Councillor Roberts, who aired some, I suppose, sensible comments or concerns around the one-stop shop. I think was the gist of Councillor Roberts's, which you've touched on, and Councillor Purser was around movement and staff, and there was an example given there as well. But what I think is totally wrong for people to do, and in my opinion, all of the other speakers did this, they framed it as if we were getting rid of the historic Guildhall, and we're not. Councillor Birch referred to it as being owned since 1864 by the taxpayers of Northampton. It still will be. There will be no change to that. I've heard this being framed that we're getting rid of the building and we're kicking the mayoralty with 800 years of history out. Neither of those things are true. I don't agree with Councillor Meredith that people know that the town council are in the Guildhall. I really disagree with that. I think people still do not differentiate, for good reasons or bad, they still do not differentiate between the different levels of local government in the same way that they did when there was the county council and the borough council operating on two sides of the road. I think they still see it as the council and the mayor. And that perception will continue, and it will continue because the council will still be in the historic Guildhall, as will be the mayor. My concern around this was that the mayor should absolutely be based in that building. And it is crystal clear to me in the report that he will be. So the mayor doing tours of the building for the scouts or the brownies and anyone that wants to visit it, that all of that heritage and heritage open days and all of that stuff can continue. So I think we need to be very careful with how we frame this. And when we frame it incorrectly, I think it's justifiable for me to call us out on that and say, we need to frame this absolutely correctly. We are not getting rid of the Guildhall, the historic Guildhall, and we're not getting rid of the mayor. That is crystal clear from the report, and it's crystal clear for me to see.
Thank you, Mike. Matt, did I see you were signaling?
Meredith, you've given your opinion, I've given mine. Please respect mine as I respect yours.
And here's my opinion.
Let's have your opinion, Matt,
Well, no,
please, if we may.
all I wanted to do for the record, I just wanted to register my, I take exception at the suggestion that we paid no regard or appreciation of the history. I'm a proud Northamptonian, like Adam just described himself. I'm an alderman on that plaque that has been referenced to tonight. I live in Duston. The town council doesn't cover my area. The suggestion that we're sort of knocking the Guildhall down or completely eroding that is I think just pure politicalisation of this subject. So I think we've got to be very careful what we say and who we're saying it to. And just again, I take exception of the suggestions that have been made this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Any further comments at all? Were there any other technical points picked up that we need for clarification? I don't think there were really, were there? Anything that either gentleman wanted to add? Simon, did you have any comment?
I did note 1 or 2 points on the way through, which are just sort of points of factual clarification, really. There was a suggestion that the coroner could work out of the county hall, and it might seem strange, but that's completely impractical. The courtrooms are not suitable for modern coroner practice, and because it's a Grade 1 listed building, we can't change them, whereas the council chamber in the Guildhall does work. So, for very good practical reasons, actually respecting history reasons, we can't do that. There was a question asked, has there been an equality impact assessment done? Yes, there has, and we're working through to make sure that is followed through. Councillor Roberts asked about the Met Lab, and we're working through resolving the issues in that area, just to give an assurance on that. There was a question about the adverse attention from auditors and government. That risk was identified because the government's expectation, the Office of Local Government as it now is, and also the audit framework, is very interested in the way local authorities use their resources effectively. So us failing to address an outstanding property issue for an extended period is the kind of thing that will get the auditors interested, and that's not something that is good for the council. And finally, there was a question about, 2 questions from Councillor Purser. Why in the report suggestion does Towcester Town Council get rent-free access to the forum, but Northampton Town Council doesn't? That's actually fairly straightforward. What we're proposing with Towcester Town Council, I'll come closer. The reason that it is proposed Towcester Town Council gets rent-free access to the forum, but Northampton Town Council does not, is simply because it is a property transaction which is proposed. Towcester Town Council controls an asset that this council would benefit from controlling. This council has an asset that Towcester Town Council may, we don't know, may want. And that exchange is a perfectly logical and reasonable property matter. It's not giving Towcester Town Council any kind of special favour. It is simply conducting a commercial transaction in a fair and reasonable fashion. And finally, there was a question about why would we invest in 1 Angel Square when Western Council doesn't own it? Really 2 responses to that. One is to say, actually, the kind of investment we're talking about would be fully used up in terms of economic return within the life of the lease. So there's no real concern there. But secondly, when the lease expires, the council has the option to reacquire the building for about a year's rent. So actually, we do have an economic interest in the building post the end of the lease. Hopefully, those are useful clarifications on those sort of factual points.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. I think we're probably all done then on comments, questions, observations and so on. Yeah. Okay, right. As always, your recommendations are at section 3. Can I thank all the speakers for their contribution and their comments, and ask the Cabinet, please, if you wouldn't mind signalling your agreement to those recommendations. Is that agreed? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Unanimous. Yes. Thank you. Takes us on to item 15. This is procurement of bus shelter advertising franchise. Dennis, we've given you 10 minutes to speak. You barracked people from there. We wish you a good night. Could you please leave quietly? Thank you very much. Okay, item 15, procurement of bus shelter advertising franchise contract would have been presented by Councillor Larratt in his absence, so a few comments to make. So earlier we presented the report on the interim bus policy, and as was said then, buses are clearly an important part of our transport infrastructure, reducing congestion, providing greener journeys, offering access for longer trips to people who do not have the use of a car or cycle. However, waiting for a bus is a key part of the journey, particularly at busy bus stops. It makes sense to provide shelter for people waiting so they are protected from the great British weather, especially our 46 types of rain. Okay, apparently that's a reference from Phil to Paddington. Okay. WNC inherited various arrangements for bus shelters when it came into existence. The largest number were provided by Adshel and Clear Channel under an old contract with NBC. Some were provided by NCC. A small number were owned directly by NBC or DDC. We need to rationalise these arrangements and enable ourselves to provide shelters where they are most needed, whilst minimising costs to the taxpayer and ideally generating an income. To do that, we need clear and transparent arrangements which minimise unnecessary risk to the operators, as otherwise that risk will come as a cost to us and the taxpayer. We engage with the market and proposals for a new contract to be funded by advertising are set out in this report. In particular, WNC will meet the capital costs of new shelters from its capital budgets, so operators do not need to include the cost of that in their operating budgets. A clear approach to advertising content is set out, what is allowed and what isn't, protecting the vulnerable whilst giving as much certainty as possible about what is allowed. Overall, this is a sensible approach to delivering a much needed public amenity. So we have a couple of speakers on this, which is Councillor Harris and then Councillor Holland-Delamere. Apologise, I wish I'd read Phil's note. I could have done a better delivery on the joke, possibly.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief on this. Stuart is aware of some of the comments I'm going to make because we have talked about this before. The point I want to make again is bus shelters in rural areas are quite few and far between in some villages. These are bus shelters that predominantly would probably not fit in this policy in the sense that they don't have advertising linked to them. But nonetheless, there is a need for bus shelters in some of those areas. Some are parish maintained, but as you know, some of the parishes are actually quite small and often don't have the resources to fund their own, or even in some cases to fully maintain what they have already. So my question is, on my point, two things really. One is, please, can we make sure that we include the rural areas again? I could give you at least 2 or 3 locations where bus shelter would be welcome, because that 46 types of rain cuts through if you haven't got anything to hide underneath. And I guess a sort of a wider question really, is there the opportunity to remove and or transplant any existing bus shelters? I won't go down to the level that we've heard tonight, but there is a place that we've all been visiting quite recently, funnily enough. I think there might be an election taking place. And there's a great example there where in fact there aren't any buses, but there are several really good bus shelters that sit there doing nothing. And it would be really useful if there aren't going to be any buses, maybe to put them to use elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Keith, we'll come back to a couple of these points.
Okay, so yep, sensible report. Obviously, I mean, there's just a few points that I just really want considered as part of any process to look at the contract going forward. So Daventry bus station really does need improvements. It needs a bit of a TLC. So I think any advertising to get that up to standard would be great for the people of Daventry. Unadopted shelters. So Billing Parish Council will be quite happy that I'm mentioning it. We've got a series of unadopted and current contracts that are just sitting there, need a bit of TLC. They're looking a bit dilapidated. We definitely need to sort them out. Just one question about the advertising as well. Is there opportunities for parish, town and West Northamptonshire to advertise events, but also our services at a preferential rate in terms of those contracts? Because I think when we've got those assets that we're sort of contributing towards, it would be sensible that if, in particular, for example, in the urban areas where they are digital displays, it would be good to have every so often, 1 every 10 vote adverts that it's referring to something that we as a civic structure do in our area. Consideration of antisocial behaviour and vandalism issues. I think in terms of going forward for any siting of bus shelters, you do need to talk to local councillors and the local communities, because there is a reason why in some places there aren't bus shelters, because of historic issues, repeated historic issues. And actually in some of those areas, the frequency of services is sufficient that you don't have to wait for an hour, like in a rural areas for a bus that is an hour late. And it was quite funny. There was one advertisement that I saw at a bus stop once. Again, it's a digital provider. It was advertising a brilliant store in Northampton that had closed the year before. so it's brilliant advertising a company that no longer existed in Northampton. So sometimes they're not always on the ball. And one mention I saw, a mention of a previous contract for Adshel referring to NNC. I don't think NNC existed. I'm sure it means NBC. Is that right? Thank you.
Jolly good. Thank you, Keith. Get perhaps some clarification on some of these points. I remember when I was chairman of parish council and bus routes changed to go a different way around a circular route. We found that actually it was cheaper to leave the bus stops in on the other side of the road and put new ones on this side. Transplanting them is an expensive business where you end up with an old one, given that routes do occasionally change. So that may be part of the answer on that one. I don't know. A few interesting questions there. I don't know, Stuart, are there any points there that you would be kind enough to be able to respond on from Keith and Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, the authors of the report behind me, I'm sure Simon will be happy to chip in, but I think all of the points that you've mentioned, I mean, this is about the procurement of a contract. And when we take that forward, we can look at all of the points that you've made. I think at the separating out of the purchase and the development from the marketing is the key point here. That gives us lots more flexibility. And that's certainly the discussions that we've had in regard to this. So again, rather than going through individual points, I think what I can do is take all those points away. And then certainly we're more than happy within the bus strategy group to continue that conversation as part of that, if that works for the members asking the questions. So I think that probably deals with it, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. Sorry, I thought you were indicating to speak, but Simon, did you want to add anything? Perhaps we've got it all covered.
Chairman Stewart's covered it. I wouldn't have added anything beyond that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, any further comments at all from the Cabinet or questions? No. Okay, I think we're happy with that one, in which case recommendations at section 3. Again, can you signal your agreement, please? Is that agreed? Thank you. Right, takes us on to item 16, and this is a new public mortuary. This one's with Mike. Once Mike's done an introduction, we have 2 speakers, Councillors Beardsworth and Holland Edelmere. Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. Mortuaries aren't the most joyous of topics to discuss, but it's an important topic nonetheless, because there's currently a shortage of mortuary facilities across Northamptonshire. Unfortunately, what this leads to is a lack of viewing facilities for the bereaved, and it can often mean families travelling to other hospitals or other mortuaries in Leicester, Oxford or London, which obviously comes at the worst possible time to then expect them to travel. It also leads to rising costs for the council in terms of transportation and storage. This proposal enables us to meet the needs of our area, as well as generating income by attracting business from neighbouring areas as well. And it will enable us to provide the very latest technology and a full range of services that the new mortuary has. And the intention is to make it, you know, something that nationally we can be proud of, because mortuaries don't often update and change themselves. The current facilities within our hospitals are in much need of refurbishment. And if agreement is reached with the NHS, we could also benefit. They could also benefit from those facilities and make a saving to the public purse as a whole. The facility will also enable us to better be able to respond in terms of a major incident involving a mass fatality or a pandemic. And obviously, just so that people are aware, the current additional temporary facilities that we have at the Lees were put there as part of our response to the COVID pandemic. The temporary facility, if we were to update it, would need to hire a CT scanner, and it would need some additional storage in the event of any mass fatality. It would also require the replacement of the current units, which, as you would expect, were put together very hurriedly and were certainly not built to last as a permanent facility would be. It also relies on staff to operate, which takes them away from their core duties and can cause delays to inquests. So providing really modern facilities that are not currently available will also be to provide services like children's pathology. Obviously not a very nice topic to look at. We'd get a CT scanner in there as well, and we'd be able to offer non-invasive post-mortems that are required in certain faiths and other niche services as well, which offers a wider opportunity for income generation. Before the question crops up, the build cost for the new mortuary is estimated at £9.4 million. The proposed site is council-owned land, so there's no cost of procuring land in that. That's at Booth Meadow, which is a well-placed road network for wider hospitals and funeral directors. It's designed to meet council's wider sustainability objectives as too, so we'll make sure that they're a full part of the construction. And with that, Leader, we can take the public speakers and then come back on due course.
Jolly good, thank you, Mike. So 2 speakers, Councillor Beardsworth first. Sally, over to you.
Not quite as an emotive subject, this one, unless you need one. But as I say, we have an aging population. We need to have this provision, and it's very close to the town, which makes it much more easier for people to do viewings of loved ones that they've lost. And also with the technology that there is today, the non-invasive postmortems are much kinder for people to experience, to understand that the parents or somebody isn't being cut up. So I think it is quite a nice way. So I'm very pleased that we're going to have this. I think it will be a great advantage to the town and for the residents. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sally. Thank you for your comments. Keith, Councillor Holland-Delamere.
And our group also welcomes this report. It's definitely forward thinking. I thank Martin Henry for his briefing, for Jonathan Harris and myself about this project. Yeah, it's brilliant actually, and the proximity to major road networks, arterial roads, is positioned between North and West Northamptonshire. It's brilliant, and I have received assurances that, of course, it won't get flooded given what happened in the vicinity of that in the last month. So I welcome this, and I look forward to seeing the fruition of this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. I know that officers did take account of a look at that in the current period, and actually look at where the flooding was, and all of that has been taken into consideration. I think it sounds like, Leader, we have full agreement on this. So I'll just say I really want, as quickly as possible, for people in my team not to have to tell a grieving family that they need to go to Oxford to view the body. So the quicker we can get this done, the better. So I look forward to being in a position where we can perhaps have a look round the new facility, as gruesome as that may seem.
Yeah, thank you. Much needed. Thank you. I think broadly it seems all in support, doesn't it? In which case we'll direct the Cabinet's attention to the recommendations of section 3. Can I ask you please to signal your agreement? Agreed? Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, now our next item is exempt. We do this reluctantly, but we do it when we may be at risk of disadvantaging the taxpayer, which in this we would, as a property transaction that revealing certain facts would not be good for the public purse. Just going to ask you to confirm my proposal, please, which is that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that if the public were present, it would be likely that exempt information under paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A to the Act would be disclosed to them. Do I have your approval to do that? Great, thank you very